So, since 2000, the world has been hit with more than 1,700 earthquakes with magnitude greater than 5. Many happened around the Ring of Fire, located around the Pacific Ocean. In North America, the biggest threat is the San Andreas fault line, which can create an earthquake of a magnitude higher than any other, earning it the spine-tingling nickname, the Big One. The potential destruction of California is a terrifying prospect that could have unimaginable consequences. But the Big One is just the beginning of what's to come. Bad news! Scientists have predicted an earth-shattering event that will occur in 2030. Like it or not, there's a 70% chance that we'll experience the Big One, and it will be an earthquake with a magnitude of 6.7. The San Andreas fault line will cause the Big One, but what is scary is that we can't predict it. On the other hand, a massive earthquake occurs every 100 years. This means there's always time to prepare for a natural disaster. If we traveled back in time, we'd see a few significant earthquakes like the ones that wiped out San Francisco and Fort Tejon. Buildings made a long time ago are not quake-proof. They will collapse. Even if they survive, you should not enter them. But buildings are not the most dangerous part. You should watch out for electrical lines and gas pipes. Your hill house might be lovely, but it is extremely unsafe. During quakes, the hill can turn into a massive landslide that will destroy everything in its path. Say goodbye to road trips because all the roads will be ruined. You should have some spare water and food since you won't be able to go to the supermarket. This disaster won't be cheap. It will cost the U.S. around $200 billion to recover from the quake. At least the earthquake will not trigger tsunamis. But there's something it can cause more damage than the Big One. The notorious Cascadia subduction zones start in California and ends up all the way in Vancouver, Canada. The San Andreas fault line is nothing compared to this zone. It can wipe the whole coast off the face of the Earth, an example of hyperbole. Subduction zones are tectonic plates forced to be one under the other and constantly pulling apart. One is called the North American Plate and the other is the Juan de Fuca Plate. Zones like these are not to be messed with, since they are terrifying hotspots for earthquake activity and extremely dangerous because they cause massive underwater quakes. But they are underwater, so what can they do to us? Well, they can cause giant tsunamis, flooding cities, and destroying the coastline. Right now, the most active zone is the Ring of Fire. The Cascadia zone might be less active, but it is like a sleeping beast that can wake up and destroy everything in its path, causing a groundbreaking earthquake. The last time all this stress was released was in the year 1700. Unlike the San Andreas quake, this one will cause massive tsunamis and much bigger shocks. Let's hope you'll be camping in an open field at that time, because most buildings and bridges will likely be destroyed. Also, be ready for the aftershocks, as they'll be devastating. Nature won't be spared either. Landslides will change animals' habitats. Even our homes will be changed forever. Luckily, there is a light at the end of the tunnel, and scientists are doing everything they can to ensure our safety. New rules are implemented. Every new building must be able to withstand massive shocks. They're developing modern warning systems, and every new infrastructure must follow strict quake-proof guidelines. The Juan de Fuca and the North American plates are locked together, but they won't stay like that forever. When they unlock, get ready for a massive shake. The closer you are to the epicenter, the more damage you'll experience. But even if you are lucky to be far away, you may still feel the ground shaking for some time. Now, if we compare the Cascadia subduction zone and the San Andreas fault, we'll see how much more dangerous the Cascadia zone is. In 1994, there was an enormous 6.7 magnitude earthquake in the Northridge area, close to the San Andreas fault. Sadly, many people didn't make it, and some were injured. Back then, buildings were not strong and earthquake-proof, and many of them were damaged. The Cascadia subduction zone can potentially cause a magnitude 9 earthquake. A magnitude 6 quake has the power of around 44 million pounds of dynamite, but a magnitude 9 has the power of 44 trillion pounds of dynamite. The strongest ever recorded quake was in Chile. Its magnitude measured 9.5, and it destroyed most everything. So let's say you've survived the quake, but the struggle is far from over. Soon after, a massive tsunami will strike, with waves that might reach up to 100 feet in some areas. That's so unlike the San Andreas earthquake, which can't produce any significant waves. So say goodbye to your beautiful garden, since salt water will destroy trees and plants, changing the environment for a period of time. The only positive thing will be you won't need Halloween decorations, because all those dried-out trees will resemble a ghost forest. The combination of waves, quakes, and the sheer size of the area will make this natural disaster much more dangerous than any caused by the San Andreas Fault or the so-called Big One. A quake similar to this happened around 300 years ago. Many more have been recorded in the past 3,500 years, proving that they continually occur every 400 to 600 years. So, technically, we have around 100 to 300 years before the next big one hits. We still have no idea how exactly the Cascadia subduction zone works, because we discovered it in 1970. This zone is super scary because it can cause big earthquakes. It was found by accident when researchers studied the Ring of Fire. They wanted to know if this area had caused any trouble in the past years, and the proof was under their noses. In Washington, there is a horror forest where nothing has been growing for years. When researchers tested the soil, they found a tremendous amount of salt. They put two and two together and concluded that a massive tsunami had been the reason. Experts still didn't know when the forest was destroyed. But Japan kept records of a gigantic earthquake that had a similar effect. It was the one that happened in the year 1700. There is a 1 in 3 chance that the next one will occur in 2050. You must know how to survive the Canadian earthquakes and make it out unscathed, so listen carefully. Those who live in this area have almost no experience with earthquakes like this one. Surviving the quake is relatively easy, but the tsunami coming afterwards is the real danger. After the shake, find the highest ground and go there. Only bring the essentials, like food and water. Yeah, leave your baseball card collection at home. After the first hit, don't try to go down. Seismologists say that most likely there will be a few more waves, and they have proven this. On the 22nd of May, 1960, seismologist Jerry Eston and his 4 friends went to Hawaii to see an expected tsunami that was to happen around midnight. They set up their gear on Wailuku Bridge with an escape route planned. This bridge had been destroyed in the previous tsunami, but the new one was much taller and better. After midnight, the water was 4 feet above the average level. The second wave hit a half hour after midnight, and the water rose another 9 feet by 1 a.m. The water started going down and dropped by 7 feet, but the horror was far from over. Next, they saw a wave that was around 20 feet tall. This shows us that tsunamis are unpredictable, and we should listen to experts to stay safe.
Around 5.3 million years ago, a crucial event reshaped the Mediterranean region. It was a colossal flood that refilled the local sea, which had been extremely barren and salty up until that point. It got the name Zanclean Flood, and it forever changed the geography of the area. The Mediterranean Sea is surrounded by Europe, Africa, and Asia, and connects to the ocean by the Strait of Gibraltar. This is quite a narrow passage, measuring about 8 miles. It may not be that wide, but the strait plays a crucial role in maintaining the liquid balance between these two bodies of water. About 6 million years ago, a bunch of things might have caused the Mediterranean to be cut off from the Atlantic Ocean. Some say it was an ice age. Others speak of tectonic movements, like earthquakes. Whatever the cause, it pushed the Mediterranean area into a period called the Mycenaean Salinity Crisis. For about 1,000 years, the sea slowly evaporated, leaving behind a dry basin that was several miles below sea level. This crisis really changed the landscape, creating conditions similar to those found in today's Dead Sea. What this means is that the lush Mediterranean beauty used to be a super salty environment, containing nearly 10 times more salt than the ocean. Say you could have visited. You would have been able to effortlessly float on the little water you could find, even if you're not a skilled swimmer. The amount of salt and that mineral content would have made it challenging for most creatures to survive. However, some hardy microorganisms, such as bacteria, could have adapted to these harsh conditions. These days, at the bottom of the Mediterranean Sea, we can find holes as large as the Grand Canyon, and they seem to have formed during that same period of dehydration. Evidence suggests that massive rivers, such as the Nile and the Rhone, flowed directly into the Mediterranean back then, leaving behind canyons as they reached the bottom, thousands of feet below the sea level. People had to find some sort of explanation back in the day for the drying of the Mediterranean, so they came up with myths and legends. One such tale was told by the people of southern Iberia, in modern-day Spain and Portugal. It was also recounted by a famous Roman writer called Pliny the Elder. What this legend said was that the Mediterranean used to be cut out from the ocean until the hero Hercules, with his mighty sword, carved a path. He did so between a fictional location in modern-day Africa and the Rock of Gibraltar. This allowed the ocean waters to flow in, transforming the Mediterranean into what we know today. Some fossils also seem to confirm the unusually large flood. Remains of marine organisms were found in layers high above current sea levels. This means the areas were once submerged underwater. These fossils belong to mollusks, fish, and marine mammals. Because of modern techniques, we now have at least an estimated timing of the Zanclean flood. Scientists used computer simulations to reconstruct the event, providing further evidence that it was real. What they also discovered is that there's a possibility the Mediterranean might change once more. The Strait of Gibraltar could close, most likely because of movements deep under the ground. This could lead to the Mediterranean becoming dry again, over a span of about 1,000 years. The Mediterranean area could disappear altogether if the African continent keeps shifting north too, getting closer to Europe. Another one of those famous yet still a bit hypothetical large floods is called the Black Sea Deluge theory. Some scientists think that around 8,400 years ago, water from the Mediterranean might have spilled over into the Black Sea through a narrow passage called the Bosporus Strait. This could have caused a massive disaster, forcing people living near the Black Sea to pack up their things and move further inside the continent, in both Europe and Asia. Along with them, they might have carried stories about this colossal flood. The specialist that came up with this idea also suggested that these migrating people might have brought along new ways of farming. Not everyone from the scientific community is convinced, though. Some argue that while there might have been a flood, it likely happened earlier and was way smaller. They didn't think this flood could have caused, for example, the story of Noah's Ark. In this legend, a spiritual man was warned by a higher entity that a giant flood was on its way. The man went to gather pairs of animals and pack them all in a boat to make sure these species would survive the devastating flood. There was also the concern among scholars that discussing real floods and ancient stories too much might blur the lines between science and fiction. There may be other reasons why these flood stories are so often found across different cultures all over our planet. One idea is that floods were incredibly destructive for early farmers, so they invented myths about them signaling the end of the world. Another idea is that people stumbled upon ancient sea creature fossils in unusual places, leading them to believe there was a significant flood in the past. The solution to future floods, though, might be floating cities. As sea levels continue to rise, coastal cities like Amsterdam, New Orleans, and Venice may go under. So, floating infrastructure may be the way to go, with buildings that can rise with the water levels, making them able to resist extreme weather too. Countries like the Netherlands, which have a history of managing water risks, are pioneering these floating creations. With cities running out of space for expansion, we might be forced to move on water anyway. By moving on the water, we can reduce crowding and create more interesting ways to feed ourselves, like floating gardens. These homes also come with great alternatives to our energy needs through systems that use solar and wind power. Not to mention that these homes might turn out to be cheaper in the long run. One such floating city might pop up soon in the Maldives. Its goal is to host up to 20,000 people and will feature places to live and eat, but also shops and schools. Designed to look like coral, the region will include canals placed between some 5,000 floating pieces of land. The city will be constructed using modular units, put together in a construction site nearby. After they're completed, they'll be towed to the floating city. The next step is to secure them to a large underwater concrete hull, which is screwed tightly to the seabed on some steel stilts. All these pieces of construction let the modular units easily move as naturally as the sea. Even for those that are afraid of seasickness, there's a solution. That's what the nearby coral reef is for. It will surround the city, making a natural wave breaker. Human-made coral banks will also be placed underneath the city, which will also help coral grow naturally. The long-term goal is to make the establishment self-sufficient. It will have electricity, mostly from on-site solar power. Waste will be treated nearby and reused as plant fertilizer. Instead of air conditioning, the city will use deep-sea water cooling. This method pumps cold water from the deep sea to cool the area, saving energy. Earth is not the only planet that's seen some serious floods. In ancient times, Mars seems to have experienced them too, and they played an important role in shaping its surface. Recent research reveals that billions of years ago, Mars was heavily affected by some serious river flooding, which contributed to the formation of its valleys and canyons. The reason for these floods was heavy rainfall, which reshaped the Martian landscape in a jiffy, at times even within days or weeks. Unlike Earth, where rivers form pretty slowly, Mars experienced rapid changes because of these floods, particularly around 4 billion years ago. We've known for quite some time that there have been floods on Mars, but this study really showed us their extent. We now know they were more widespread and frequent than previously thought.
There is a powerful force hiding underground where tectonic plates meet, and one forces another under it. This happens in the Pacific and Indian Oceans. Strain builds over centuries. The tension is unbearable until the megathrust awakens. The Earth shakes with a magnitude that can exceed 9 points, more powerful than any other earthquake. When the seafloor suddenly gets pushed up fast, it sends a huge ripple across the water, and a tsunami of huge force is out. These waves are called teletsunamis, and they cross entire ocean basins, ready to take over coastlines thousands of miles away. The thrust fault stretches over 600 miles. The Earth is not just shaking, it feels like it's tearing apart. This is the power of a megathrust earthquake. Those caught in its path will have to fight for their lives. Japanese authorities recently had to issue their first ever megaquake advisory. It happened because of a strong tremor on the edge of the Nankai Trough ocean floor zone. In the end, most of the warnings were lifted, and there wasn't much damage from the 7.1 magnitude earthquake. Parts of southwestern Japan started to shake, and the superfast trains in Japan slowed down to stay safe, which made travel slower for everyone. But everyone is staying alert as they know about the risk of a megathrust earthquake that could happen within the next few decades in the Nankai Trough. The tectonic plate under the Philippine Sea is slowly sliding underneath the land where Japan is, moving just a few inches every year. The last big earthquakes from this area happened in 1944 and 1946, both with a magnitude of 8.1. These quakes have caused a lot of destruction in the country. The next megathrust earthquake in the region, if it does happen, could be between a magnitude 8 and 9. Scientists still can't agree on how likely this mega earthquake is to happen, but it could be up to 80% certainty. On the other side of the Pacific, scientists from the U.S. Geological Survey have studied a dangerous area along the U.S. West Coast. It's called the Cascadia subduction zone, and it stretches from northern California to northern Vancouver Island in Canada. Over the past 14,200 years, there have likely been at least 30 big earthquakes in this region. One major quake happens every 500 years on average. But for a long time now, Cascadia has been quiet, and it worries scientists. They think this might be because the area is locked, meaning the tectonic plates are stuck together and building up a lot of pressure. Eventually, the part of the seafloor could suddenly break and move by several feet. The shaking would be just 5 minutes, but it would create a powerful tsunami as the seafloor shifts that would last for 10 hours. If it happens, it's going to be the worst natural disaster in the country's history, according to experts. The ground on some inland hills could turn into something like quicksand. This would cause the hillsides to slide and crumble, taking down roads and bridges. Around 620,000 buildings could be badly damaged or even collapse, including about 100 hospitals and 2,000 schools. People in Washington state might have to take care of themselves without help for 2 weeks, finding food, water, and shelter on their own. Scientists are studying slow slip events, where the tectonic plates move very slowly over weeks or months, releasing some energy but not enough to stop a big one. Every time the magnitude of an earthquake goes up by just one number, the energy it releases is 40 times bigger. So we'd need about 1 million small earthquakes every day for 500 years straight to release the same energy as one huge magnitude 9 earthquake. But these small earthquakes might be clues that a bigger earthquake is coming. To better monitor the Cascadia fault, experts are mapping the fault more accurately and adding better monitoring tools offshore. Scientists receive over $10 million to install seismic sensors and seafloor pressure gauges on a fiber optic cable off the coast of Oregon. The goal is to be ready to warn people and potentially save lives when a big earthquake strikes. A sharp megathrust earthquake happened in this part of the world in 1964. It went down in history as the Great Alaska Earthquake and had a magnitude of 9.2. It lasted for more than 4 minutes, making it the most powerful earthquake in the history of the US and North America. The ground shook so hard that it caused huge cracks and landslides. In Anchorage, many houses, buildings, and roads were destroyed because they weren't built to handle such a big earthquake. In some places, the land was permanently changed. For example, the coastline near Kodiak and Hinchinbrook Island was lifted by 30 feet. In other areas, like Gerwood and Portage, the ground sank by 8 feet. They had to rebuild roads higher so they wouldn't be flooded by the time. A huge 27-foot tsunami wiped out the entire village of Chiniga. Many coastal towns were heavily damaged, not just by the earthquake, but also by tsunamis and the fires that followed. After the main earthquake, there were thousands of smaller aftershocks for months. A moderate earthquake of magnitude 4.4 shook Los Angeles in August 2024. Once it was over, the LA Fire Department checked around the city and didn't find any major damage or anyone hurt. In the nearby city of Pasadena, which is close to the earthquake's epicenter, a water pipe burst inside City Hall and everyone had to leave the building. Thankfully, there was no danger of a tsunami. The best we can do to avoid panic in such situations is to be prepared. Japan is one of the places on Earth where earthquakes happen the most because it sits on the edges of 4 tectonic plates. Around 1,500 of these earthquakes each year are noticeable. Because of this, the people in Japan have learned to live with earthquakes. The 1950 law set a rule that buildings should be able to handle earthquakes up to a magnitude 7 without falling apart. An update 30 years later said that buildings should only have minor damage in such earthquakes and still work as usual. But if an earthquake is even stronger, the law says the building's main job is to not collapse and save people's lives. At the most basic level, buildings are made stronger with thicker beams, pillars, and walls so they can handle shaking better. Another technique is placing special pads made from materials like rubber at the base of a building. Some buildings are even built on thick layers of padding that separate them from the ground completely, which helps protect them during an earthquake. A skyscraper might sway back and forth a lot, moving up to 5 feet. To stop it from getting damaged, engineers can add something called dampers every second floor all the way to the top. These dampers are like giant bicycle pumps, but instead of air, they're filled with liquid. When the building shakes, the dampers push against the liquid inside them. Even though the liquid doesn't squish very much, it can still absorb some of the shaking. When they're building tall skyscrapers, engineers try to make the structure as simple and balanced as possible. This means having each floor the same height and placing the support columns evenly. But sometimes, Architects who design skyscrapers don't want to make these compromises because they have creative ideas for how the building should look. Then they have to find compromise solutions. For example, Tokyo's Skytree Tower, one of the tallest buildings in the world, is designed in a futuristic style but also includes special features to protect it from earthquakes. It has a central pillar, like in traditional Japanese pagodas, and seismic dampers that help absorb the energy from an earthquake, keeping the building safe. Consider South America and Africa. Don't they kind of look like they fit together, like puzzle pieces? Well, they actually did. But about 130 million years ago, South America was like, bye, and slowly started drifting away. These days, it's around 1,800 miles from Africa, and it's still on the move. Every year, the continent shifts a little more toward the Pacific Ocean. So, how's that even happening? Tectonic plates are constantly moving. That's what makes the Earth's surface shift over time, going from this to what we see today. But those movements happen so slowly that you and I can't see them go. So, no, Brazilians or Chileans aren't out there feeling their continent inching westward. But the numbers don't lie. South America is moving, and apparently all it wants is to get as far away as possible from this massive underwater mountain range called the Mid-Atlantic Ridge. But what exactly is pushing the land toward the Pacific Ocean? It is the heat inside our planet. Way, way down beneath the ocean, there are cracks in the Earth's crust, and magma, super hot melted rock, rises up through those cracks. When that happens, the magma cools and hardens into solid rock. Over time, this process might build underwater mountains, like the Mid-Atlantic Ridge. And as more new crust forms, it begins to push the older crust out of the way. In the process, tectonic plates and the continents riding on top of them get pushed along. Now, on the other side of South America, over by the Pacific, there is the Nazca Plate. It's heavier and it's moving eastward. Since it is denser, it is sliding underneath the South American plate. This entire process is called subduction, and it's happening at a rate of about 3 inches per year. By the way, the collision between these two plates is what's behind all those breathtaking volcanoes scattered throughout the Andes, and it's also making the continent move. So, if everything goes according to plan, projections show that South America will end up more centered in the Pacific Ocean in the future. But some models suggest something way crazier. Before we get into that, though, we need to clear something up. Why on earth isn't Africa following in South America's footsteps? I mean, shouldn't it be drifting west too? Well, not quite. Africa is doing its own thing because it sits on the African plate. So the Mid-Atlantic Ridge is located between those two continents, and just like it pushes the South American plate, it also pushes the African plate, but in the opposite direction. It's like this ridge is trying to split up two ex-besties, But there's more. Africa is also being influenced by the East African Rift. That's one of those massive cracks we talked about earlier, but it's happening on land, which makes it extra dramatic. This is what's causing the continent to slowly split apart. It's a long story, but let's just say the rift is pulling Africa in more directions than South America ever had to deal with. Okay, now it is finally time to talk about that crazier thing that might happen to South America and everything around it in the future. Theory number 1. It could break away from North America. I know, super dramatic, but don't panic. We're talking hundreds of millions of years from now, and I won't be around. You see, both continents are moving in the same general direction, but at different speeds. The North American plate is cruising along at about 1 inch per year, while South America is moving a bit faster. So even though they're heading the same way, they are not keeping pace. Over time, as the Atlantic Ocean continues to widen and the Pacific keeps shrinking, all this tectonic movement could eventually pull the Americas apart. Theory number 2. Marine life could go through some major changes. Right now, the Americas act as kind of a giant wall between the Atlantic and Pacific Oceans. Because of that, sea animals have evolved differently on each side. Take the green sea turtle, for example. The ones living in the Atlantic tend to be bigger and lighter in color. Meanwhile, their Pacific cousins are usually smaller and darker. But if, one day, there is no land blocking these two populations from mixing, they would end up with brand new migration routes, new nesting spots, and a lot more overlap in their territories. Now, multiply that scenario by hundreds of other species, and things could really get shaken up. We're talking about new interactions, unexpected competition, and maybe even the rise of entirely new species. Alright, theory number 3. America might meet Africa again. Right now, the Mid-Atlantic Ridge is busy creating a new seafloor, and because of that, the Atlantic Ocean is slowly getting wider. But in about 125 million years, scientists believe that process could come to a stop. Instead of the seafloor spreading apart, the ocean floor might start getting pulled under the continents. When that happens, the Atlantic will stop growing and start shrinking. And the water section between South America and Africa is likely to be the first part pulled beneath the land. That means the Americas and Africa could meet again. And when that happens, border countries could turn into super shaky places, with earthquakes happening all the time and brand new volcanoes popping up left and right. The eastern United States would no longer be known for the peaceful green slopes of the Appalachians, but for snow-covered giants that occasionally spew lava and ash, more like the Cascade Range out west. Countries would end up with totally new neighbors. Brazil might line up with Nigeria and Cameroon. Uruguay could be sitting right next to Angola. And Argentina might be sharing a border with South Africa. So if these two continents really do merge, how intense would that be? Well, for starters, this new supercontinent would instantly become the biggest one on Earth, about 1.5 times the size of Asia. And chances are, a brand new mountain range would form right where the continents meet, creating a natural border between nations. Being part of the same massive continent could make a lot of things way easier. For one, tourism could totally take off. People traveling between countries by land without needing pricey plane tickets could be a game changer. But it wouldn't stop there. Other types of economic activity could get a major boost too. Now on one side we have South America, which already produces and sells a wide variety of foods, from wheat to bananas, beef, cocoa, soybeans, hey, you name it. On the other side, there is Africa, exporting things like textiles and clothing. That alone would make them a super powerful bloc when it comes to trading raw goods. But can you name another important thing these two continents have in common? Yep, petroleum. Countries in South America, like Brazil, Venezuela, and Colombia, are major oil exporters. And over in Africa, you've got Nigeria, Algeria, and Libya doing the same. Now, can you see just how powerful that kind of union could be? Meanwhile, let's talk about animals. These two massive lands coming together could lead us to wild meetups, like a capybara sharing space with a Nile crocodile, or a sloth seeing a hyena from the top of a tree. This could even lead to new animal hybrids showing up, like a tabby crocodile or a sloth hyena. Okay, those weren't the cleverest names, and honestly, these animals wouldn't be able to mate or even wouldn't want to. But you get the point, right? It's not all positive, unfortunately. New species showing up could become predators, competitors, or even parasites to the native plants and animals. It would take a long time for things to settle into a new balance in those border regions. But honestly, no one really knows how long it would take. The only thing I do know is neither of us will be around to see it, which is okay. If all the volcanoes on Earth suddenly erupted together, it'd be loud. We'd also have around 1,500 of these formations bursting at once. Now normally it's just 10 to 20 volcanoes that are active each day. But what would the world look like if they all blew their tops simultaneously? Geologists think it wouldn't be pretty. Even if only the land volcanoes erupted together, it would set off a chain reaction way worse than anything we've ever seen before. The two big problems would be ash and volcanic gases. While the explosions in lava would be damaging for people nearby, the real danger lies in what happens next. A thick layer of ash would cover the planet, blocking out sunlight completely. No sunlight means no photosynthesis, which means crops would fade away and temperatures would drop considerably. And all this ash cloud could remain in our atmosphere for up to 10 years. Now, ash aside, there's also acid rain to worry about. Volcanic gases like hydrochloric acid and sulfur dioxide would mix with the atmosphere and fall back down as acid rain. This type of weather would harm the groundwater and ocean surfaces. Even if humans would find a way to survive up to this point, we'd have no corals and no other sea creatures around. Scientists have seen similar events in Earth's history at a smaller scale. Big volcanic eruptions have been linked to mass extinctions. When Mount Pinatubo erupted in 1991, it cooled parts of the world for 2 years. But the extra carbon dioxide from these eruptions could also heat the planet, the same way we turn our stoves to broil for that extra crispy layer on our casserole. Geologists also mentioned that there's evidence in our atmosphere that stuff like this may have happened in the distant past. During the Cretaceous period, carbon dioxide levels were way higher than today, which made it difficult for marine life to thrive. Who would survive all this? Probably just some extremophiles, these organisms that survive in harsh conditions like hot springs or deep undersea vents. As for humans, we could all lay low in underground bunkers until things clear up, or build multiple space stations that could fit us all. Yeah, right. The chances of all volcanoes erupting at once, though, are very slim. Whew! That's because there isn't one giant source supplying all the volcanoes on Earth. Each one of these openings has its own deposit of magma, except for a few cases where they indeed share the supply. For example, in 1912, Nova Rupta in Alaska erupted alongside another volcano sharing magma. Scientists have also found evidence of magma hiding under volcanic areas, like under the Taupau volcanic zone in New Zealand. This magma can spread out horizontally for long distances, but is still just a local feature. Even if we consider all the magma under Taupau as one system, it's not connected to other volcanic areas like Indonesia or the Philippines. Because the great majority are isolated, volcanoes can't sync up to erupt at once. The magma comes from different processes, like mantle decompression or adding water to the mantle through subduction. There's no way to make all these different volcanoes erupt together because of how tectonics work. Now, that doesn't mean we won't see interesting volcano activity in the future. Take an underwater area near British Columbia, where recently about 200 small earthquakes per hour have been noted. Deep beneath the Pacific Ocean floor, off the coast of Vancouver Island, magma is set to erupt, heating the water so much that it'll bubble like soda. However, this event will likely go unnoticed by anyone other than scientists. The anticipated eruption will most likely happen around 3 miles below the ocean surface. Scientists explain that the earthquakes range from negative to 4.1 magnitude, meaning only those nearby would feel any tremors. This unusual activity gives us a rare opportunity to study how the Earth's crust forms. The magma beneath the ocean floor is estimated to be almost 1,500 degrees Fahrenheit, but will cool rapidly upon eruption and contact with water. This runny rock will solidify upon contact with the seafloor, turning black quickly. This event will be useful for biologists too, who will have the opportunity to study the marine animals' response to any changes, like run! Antarctica, often seen as a vast icy continent, also holds a volcanic surprise beneath its frozen surface. Researchers have identified over 130 under the western ice sheet alone, making it the largest volcanic region on Earth. Most of these volcanoes, about 90, were only recently discovered in 2017. But could any of these Antarctic volcanoes actually erupt? Well, it depends on which volcano we're talking about. While these formations are relatively young in geologic terms, it's hard for scientists to tell if they're still active or not. There are only 2 confirmed active volcanoes in Antarctica, Deception Island and Mount Erebus. The latter, standing tall as the highest peak on the continent, has been continuously erupting since at least 1972. It's known for emitting gas and steam, and sometimes even throwing out rocks in what are called strombolian eruptions. One of its most notable features is a persistent lava lake in its crater, a rare phenomenon due to specific conditions needed to keep the surface molten. For instance, It's fueled by a steady supply of magma from deep within the Earth's mantle. This continuous inflow of molten rock provides the material for the lava lake to exist. It also features low ambient temperatures. Despite its location in Antarctica, Erebus has relatively mild temperatures in its summit region because of the heat generated by the volcanic activity. This allows the lava lake to remain liquid rather than freezing over. Deception Island, another active volcano, last erupted in the 70s. While it's currently not showing signs of imminent eruption, it's being monitored closely for any concerning activity. Apart from these two being confirmed to be active, Antarctica is dotted with fumaroles, openings in the Earth's crust that release gases and vapors. Sometimes these fumaroles can create icy towers reaching heights of 10 feet. What we should focus on is maybe supervolcanoes. They're this type that has the potential to produce the most massive and destructive eruptions. Unlike the typical one, which has a single vent, supervolcanoes have a vast magma chamber beneath the surface, spanning tens or even hundreds of miles in diameter. Their eruptions can have catastrophic effects on the surrounding area and even impact global climate patterns because of the amounts of ash and gases they spill out into the atmosphere. One famous supervolcano is the Yellowstone one, which some say is gearing up for another eruption. It has the capacity to unleash a colossal eruption, spewing over 240 cubic miles of material. As much as we'd like to predict its behavior, volcanoes don't stick to a calendar. On the contrary, eruptions simply happen when there's enough magma beneath the surface. There also needs to be enough pressure for the magma to travel upwards. As far as we can measure, these conditions are not currently met at Yellowstone. Sure, many volcanoes operate on a cyclical pattern, but that doesn't mean Yellowstone is overdue. In fact, Yellowstone has had just 3 major eruptions over the past 2.1 million years. Also, the term supervolcano refers to the formation's size, not necessarily how fussy it is. Yellowstone's monitoring is extensive, tracking seismicity, ground deformation, thermal emissions, gas, water chemistry, and surface changes. Signs of an eruption would include thousands of earthquakes over a short period. We'd also see deformation on the ground and weird gas emissions ahead of time. Stable as it might look like for now, the consequences of it having a major eruption could look ugly. Ash dispersion could blanket a 500-mile radius, potentially disrupting Midwest agriculture and clogging waterways. Ash and gas emissions into the stratosphere could induce global climatic effects, making our planet colder for several years. And yes, we've seen some research that it shows there's more liquid molten rock under the Yellowstone volcano than scientists believe. But that doesn't translate to imminent danger.
Africa is ripping itself apart. A giant crack is tearing through the continent and stretching south like a zipper being pulled open. And it's happening faster than anyone expected. Now, scientists think the main trigger might not be buried deep inside Earth, but up in the sky. That's right. What might be speeding up this breakup process is the region's drying climate and brutal droughts. And that feels off, right? Usually tectonic plates move first and the climate changes afterward, but in East Africa, it might be flipped. The climate may actually be helping the plates pull apart faster. But first, let's look at what's really going on there. So, Earth's crust isn't one solid shell. It's made of giant tectonic plates, massive slabs of rock that never stop moving. They grind past each other, collide, slide under, climb over, or stretch apart. This motion is so slow, we don't notice it. But over long periods, those tiny shifts reshape continents, just like what's happening in Africa. For about 30 million years, the Arabian Plate has been moving away from the African Plate. That slow pull split the land. The seawater rushed in to fill the gap, forming the Red Sea and the Gulf of Aden. And that's not the only breakup happening there. In Eastern Africa, the Somali Plate is stretching away from the Nubian Plate. This is opening up the East African Rift Valley, cutting right through places like Ethiopia and Kenya. The region where these plates meet has a name. It's a triple junction. But in this case, they aren't crashing into each other. All three tectonic plates are diverging. When that happens, the crust gets pulled in different directions at once, like fabric being stretched from three corners. It weakens, thins out, and cracks open. They're pulling apart at different speeds too. The Arabian plate is moving away from Africa at about an inch per year. The two African plates are separating more slowly, roughly between half an inch and 0.2 inches per year. And as they open that gap, hot material from deep inside Earth rises up and hardens, creating brand new seafloor along the split. I know, a few inches per year sounds ridiculously slow, but what makes this event so fascinating is that we're watching it happen in real time. We can actually see Africa slowly breaking apart, and it's terrifying. Back in 2005, a 35-mile long rift that opened up in the Ethiopian desert. The crack is 20 feet wide in some places, which is roughly the size of a shipping container. This is just one example of how active the region really is. From space, satellite images show valleys and rifts slowly widening over time. And down on the ground, people are posting videos of places where the Earth has already split open, leaving big cracks and gaps. Roads, houses, even schools are getting torn apart. The whole area keeps shaking from earthquakes, and the volcanoes are very active. What I mean is, even though this splitting process is super slow, we can actually see it happening. And it's unstoppable. Experts believe this crack in the East African Rift Valley will become a gateway. Waters of the Indian Ocean will eventually invade the valley and fill the growing gap. That will help pull the land apart even more, and eventually it'll create a brand new ocean. And we know that can happen because Earth has done it before. That's exactly how the Atlantic Ocean formed about 180 million years ago, when South America and Africa pulled away from each other. If the East African Rift keeps opening up, parts of Eastern Africa, Somalia, Kenya, Tanzania, Mozambique, and a big chunk of Ethiopia could one day break away from the rest of the continent. That means countries like Zambia and Uganda could actually end up with brand new stunning coastlines. But don't pack your swimsuit yet. Unfortunately, none of us will be swimming in the waters of this future sixth ocean anytime soon. Scientists estimate the full split would take about 5 to 10 million years. That's basically forever in human terms. But in Earth terms, it's surprisingly fast, almost like record speed. Now, scientists are trying to figure out why it's happening so fast. I mean, faster than it should. And here's a new intriguing possibility: a drying climate. One of the biggest clues starts right here at Lake Turkana. This lake in Kenya is about 19 miles wide and it's up to 400 feet deep in some places. But that's nothing compared to more than 5,000 years ago, when the lake level was up to 500 feet higher. Back then, the continent was going through something known as the African Humid Period. It was a time when Africa was wetter than it is today, and the Sahara wasn't a desert at all. It was green, wet, and full of lakes, rivers, and vegetation. But since then, the whole region has shifted into a much drier phase. So researchers took sediment samples from the bottom of Lake Turkana to figure out past water levels, and how sediment washed into the lake over time. And while they were doing that, they noticed something else. Those sediment layers preserved lots of tiny faults, and even the fingerprints of ancient earthquakes. Wait, wow! That means Lake Turkana might not be a simple lake. It could actually be one huge crack in the earth that eventually filled up with water. In other words, it could be a direct result of this whole rifting process. And now scientists think the same thing might be true for other deep, narrow lakes in the region, like Lake Malawi along the Tanzania-Mozambique border. So, scientists came up with a wild theory. What if these lakes are helping split Africa apart faster? Okay, maybe the theory isn't that wild. After all, water can indeed affect tectonic plates. For example, when glaciers melt and disappear, all that weight is removed, and the land underneath slowly pops back up, kind of like bread rising after you take something heavy off of it. That's called isostatic rebound, and big amounts of water can do the opposite. They press down on the crust, which can also affect things like faults and earthquakes. At Lake Turkana, something interesting shows up in the data. After the African humid period ended, the faults around the lake started moving faster, by about 0.007 inches per year. I know, that's a lot of zeros. But over thousands of years, that extra push can add up. And it could help explain why earthquakes might be more common in the region today than they were around 8,000 years ago. The study then ran computer simulations and found two likely reasons the shaking and fault movement sped up. First, there's less water pushing down on the ground. With that weight gone, the faults can slide more easily, like loosening a vise that was squeezing two pieces of wood together. Second, there's a volcano on an island on the south side of Lake Turkana. Deep underground, it has a pocket of hot, molten rock. When the lake level dropped after the African humid period, the pressure on the earth below eased up, like taking the lid off a pot. That lets the rock underneath melt a bit more. The extra melt flows into the volcano's magma chamber, swelling it up like a balloon. And that extra pressure can jolt nearby faults and trigger more movement. So yeah, drought and falling lake levels could be speeding up the splitting process. But it's not like the climate is creating the rift from scratch. It's more like the ground is already under tension, and the climate is giving it a little extra push. The real reason Africa is breaking apart might be related to something called superplume, an enormous column of scorching hot rock rising from deep inside the Earth. Think of it like a balloon underground that's slowly filling up. As it pushes upward, it puts pressure on the crust above it. Over time, that pressure weakens the crust and slowly cracks it apart. And even though none of us will be alive to see the final result of this process, it's still amazing to realize that we're watching a continent split, almost in real time. Not an earthquake, but a mega earthquake could happen in Japan. It's scarier, bigger, and more destructive than ordinary tremors. However, the problem is that it will occur underwater, which means it will trigger a giant tsunami 100 feet high. A column of water nearly as high as a 10-story building will collapse on coastal cities, wiping out hundreds of houses. The water flow can destroy everything in its path like a bowling ball that knocks down pins. And then another wave may come, and another one. Anyone who is at risk should be on their guard. How to survive? You'll find out later in this video. But first, let's find out what a mega earthquake is. This is an earthquake with a magnitude 9 or more. This is a very rare phenomenon, and it depends not on the power of the shock, but on the length of the fault where it occurs. The longer the fault, the stronger the earthquake. But what are these faults? These are cracks in the rocks of the Earth's crust that move relative to each other. Imagine a large puzzle where every detail is a giant tectonic plate. When one part of the puzzle moves away from another, or when they collide, that's when earthquakes begin. If the fault between the parts is long, then the magnitude of the earthquake is great. The largest mega earthquake ever recorded occurred on May 22, 1960, in Chile. The fault was almost 1,000 miles long. It's almost half the way between Chicago and Los Angeles. And now, a similar mega earthquake can happen, underwater. That's how it all started. Last year, on August 8th, at 4:42 p.m., an earthquake with a magnitude of 7.1 occurred in southern Japan. The tremors appeared off the coast of the mainland island of Kyushu. Everyone was terrified as they expected a large tsunami to appear. But fortunately, they faced only a small wave. It collapsed on the shore, but didn't destroy buildings. About 15 people got hurt, which is sad, of course. But it could have been worse. It seemed that the disaster had passed. The residents breathed a sigh of relief. However, after that, the Japan Meteorological Agency sent a warning about a possible mega earthquake that could be incredibly devastating. A previous earthquake of 7.1 magnitude could be a harbinger of an impending catastrophe, a disaster that could affect 250,000 people. As soon as people heard this, they ran to buy groceries. Increased demand and a slight panic led to shortages of rice and several other basic products. People were stocking up on food and preparing for the worst. But a week later, the Japan Meteorological Agency canceled the warning. It turned out that the small tsunami on Kyushu Island was not a harbinger. No one knows whether a mega earthquake and tsunami will happen in this region, but the chances are very high. To understand the nature of this danger, we need to dive underwater in a place called the Nankai Trough. It is a 500-mile-long underwater fault that runs almost parallel to the Pacific coast of Japan. This is where the two giant sections of the Earth's crust meet, the Philippine Sea Plate and the Eurasian Plate. And the Philippine Plate is subducting and slowly slipping under the Eurasian Plate, on which Japan is partly located. During this movement, the plates get stuck, accumulating energy. Afterward, when they move and align again, they release a powerful burst of energy. And this energy is capable of causing one of the most powerful earthquakes in the world. Experts report that the probability of a mega earthquake and a tsunami is about 80%. Over the past 1,400 years, mega earthquakes have occurred every 100 to 200 years in this region. The last time this happened in Japan was in 1946. The entire country felt a powerful tremor that destroyed 36,000 houses in the southern part of Honshu Island. Every year, the probability of a repeat of this disaster increases by 1%. And do you know how many years have passed? 79. According to experts, a mega earthquake with a magnitude of 8 to 9 can trigger a tsunami that will flood small islands off the coast of Japan. And areas with large populations on the islands of Honshu and Shikoku can be flooded in minutes. Hundreds of thousands of people are at risk. It can be billions and even trillions of dollars worth of damage. According to some reports, about 530,000 people may lose their homes. To save lives, the country needs to carry out a large-scale evacuation. But the problem is that no one knows the exact date. In general, no one in the world can predict in advance when the next big earthquake will occur. In the case of the Nankai Trough, it can happen in a few days, or a few years, or even centuries. So, what should people do? Prepare. Japan has been experiencing earthquakes for a long time, so the country has learned to survive a disaster with minimal losses. Almost every building in Japan is equipped with dampers, which are devices that suppress any vibrations and make houses more resistant to shaking. In addition, on the shores of Japan, residents have built long and high shields that don't allow powerful waves to break through to land. Japan also has an advanced earthquake warning system. It's impossible to predict powerful seismic activity in a few days or weeks, but it's possible to detect small tremors that may portend an impending earthquake. Special devices monitor seismic signals and transmit the data to certain programs. Then, they evaluate the magnitude and intensity of the tremors and send warnings to people's phones. This can save seconds and even minutes for locals to reach the nearest shelter in time. These systems are also used to slow down the speed of trains, to stop work at factories, hospitals, and office buildings. It's much safer for a train driver to slow down during an earthquake than to rush forward at full speed. But what if you're on the street and you can't hear your phone messages? How to act in case of disaster? This applies not only to Japan, but also to any place where a tsunami or earthquake may occur. To survive a tsunami, you need to prepare for it long before a big wave hits. It's very important to have good relations with neighbors. Be friendly with them, help them, and treat them well. In times of trouble or disaster, it's great to have people with whom you have a good relationship. They can help you get out of a difficult situation, and you can also help them. Be kind and compassionate to people. This way, it's much easier to survive any disaster. Prepare a backpack with necessities in advance. These are a first aid kit, canned food, flashlights, a battery-powered radio, and bottled water. All this will not only save your life, but will also help other people in trouble. So if you feel an earthquake start, immediately run for cover. If you're at home, try to stand against a wall closest to the center of the building, or crawl under heavy furniture that stands firmly on the floor, such as a desk or a regular table. Stay away from windows and front doors, and never use an elevator. If you're on the street, don't come close to power lines and any objects that may fall. During a tsunami, you may need to get as high as possible to avoid getting swallowed by water. Stay as far away from the shore as you can, and don't go down until you're sure it's safe. But how can you find out about an approaching wave if you haven't received the warning? When a tsunami approaches the shore, you will hear a roar similar to the rumble of a passing train or plane. If there's no elevation nearby, then try to get to the upper floors. It must be at least the 3rd floor, but it has to be a building that can resist a tsunami, such as a massive house made of concrete. If there are no such high buildings nearby, try to climb a massive tree. When the disaster is over, look around and find those you can help. Listen to messages from rescuers via radio or TV. If all is well, then you can deal with the consequences. Yes, there's a lot of work ahead, but you've survived and helped others survive. And that's the most important thing.
On January 14, 2022, residents of Anchorage, Alaska heard a series of loud bangs. They didn't stop for a half an hour. As they found later, the source of the bangs was almost 6,000 miles away in the Tongan archipelago in the southern Pacific Ocean. The Hunga Tonga underwater volcano abruptly woke up from its sound sleep. It last erupted at the end of December 2021 after several years of inactivity. Hunga Tonga sent a large plume of ash into the stratosphere that was seen in the capital city of Tonga, 43 miles away from the volcano. In the following days, it was emitting steam and gas to the height of 7 miles. Plus, it was letting out ash that accumulated next to it and even made the island on which it was standing increase in size. Then, it went back to sleep, and the officials even announced it was dormant. But just a couple of weeks later, it woke up again with a crazy force. It sent ash clouds 12 miles into the atmosphere. It blocked the sun in some places and rained down from the sky. The sound waves from the eruption traveled around the planet several times. People in Fiji heard a sound that reminded them of thunder. Some booms even reached Canada. Shockwaves went around the Earth 4 times in Japan and Utah, and at least twice in Massachusetts. The eruption caused tens of thousands of lightning flashes. It also triggered a mega tsunami hundreds of feet high. It caused damage to buildings and infrastructure, such as underwater cables. The extreme waves traveled all the way to the California coast, and there was an unusually high tide along the Pacific coast of Canada. Scientists studied seismic data to understand what caused such a massive eruption. Their research model showed that there was a big blast, likely because gas got trapped in rocks, like how a pressure cooker works when it's overcooked. This blast released a huge amount of energy, as much as 5 of the biggest underground nuclear tests. It all happened under a shallow part of the sea, where gas-filled rock was trapped. Now, normally when a volcano erupts, the fumes cause a temporary cooling effect on the Earth's surface. But Hunga Tonga's eruption was different. It didn't produce many fumes, but released a massive amount of water vapor, equal to 60,000 Olympic swimming pools. The intense heat of the eruption turned vast amounts of seawater into steam, which then blasted high into the atmosphere. All that water vapor ended up in the stratosphere, a layer of the atmosphere that's too dry to form clouds or rain. Scientists don't have any observations of volcanic eruptions like Hunga Tonga to predict its long-term effects on our weather patterns. This is because the only way to measure stratospheric water vapor is with special satellites, which have only been around since 1979, and there hasn't been an eruption similar to Hunga Tonga in that time. In fact, the Tonga eruption is the most well-recorded blast of its kind in recent history. Scientists had lots of tools to study it, like satellites that took pictures from space and sensors that listen to the vibrations and movements in the Earth. There was a similar eruption in 1991 at a volcano in the Philippines, but back then, they didn't have as many advanced tools as they do now to study it closely. Experts from different countries looked at satellite data right after the Hunga Tonga eruption. They wanted to find out how long water vapor would stay in the stratosphere, where it would go, and of course, what this would mean for the planet and for all of us. The first big result of the eruption, at least partially, was a huge hole in the stratosphere that was hanging on for several months in 2023. By the time it appeared, the water vapor had reached the polar stratosphere over Antarctica. But Hunga Tonga ended up with just a minimal effect on global average temperatures, at least for now. Let's just hope it won't repeat the story of Mount Tambora volcano in present-day Indonesia. Over 2 centuries ago, in 1815, this bad guy interrupted and caused the year without a summer. In the following year, the winter was unusually cold and wet across Europe and North America. There were also some catastrophic tsunamis, destroying homes that took 10,000 lives and 80,000 more who fell ill in the aftermath. Now, you can't miss an event like Hunga Tonga or Tambora eruption, but some underwater volcanoes are discovered by accident. A passenger on a commercial flight looked out her window above the Pacific Ocean and saw a weirdly colored patch on the water. She thought it could be an oil slick or a floating pumice raft, which is a telltale sign of a recent volcanic eruption. She decided to send a photo of this scene to a geologist. And that's how scientists found one of the largest volcanoes in the world, Havre. It's hiding about 3,000 feet below the surface. In 2012, Havre had a massive eruption that lasted about 90 days. Hot lava poured out of 14 different vents around the volcano's semicircle-shaped opening. Havre is just one of many volcanic systems covered by thousands of feet of water. These volcanoes are the most active on Earth and are part of a giant system called mid-ocean ridges that stretches around the world. This system produces about 75% of all the magma that comes out of Earth's volcanoes each year. It releases over half a cubic mile of lava. When the magma cools down, it forms the edges of new ocean plates, which are like giant puzzle pieces that make up the Earth's crust. A team of scientists studied material left on the ocean floor by volcanic eruptions from the Bronze Age. About 3,600 years ago, a volcano that was partly underwater in the southern Aegean Sea woke up with a bang. This eruption destroyed the island of Santorini and sent massive amounts of ash, rocks, and gases into the air. It left behind thick layers of ash and rock that settled in piles on the ocean floor. Scientists have been studying the ancient Santorini eruption for several years to figure out what happens during such massive ones. Their research helps explain how future volcanic eruptions could affect the weather on our planet. The study also helps scientists understand the strength of the eruptions, how high the eruption columns might go, and the sizes of the waves that form when all that ash and rock settles into terraces on the ocean floor. This information will help predict the dangers of future eruptions. Now, when a volcano erupts, the last place you want to be is inside it. But scientists did it for you. Well, kinda. They produced a smart new imaging technique that uses the best ideas from medical imaging and optical telescopes. Matrix imaging, that's what it's called, makes it easier to understand what's happening underground, even when there aren't many sensors available. These sensors, called geophones, detect and record the movement of seismic waves, which are vibrations that travel through the Earth. By studying these waves, scientists can learn about the distinct types of rocks and how they are arranged beneath the surface. The researchers test their method on a volcano in Guadalupe in the Caribbean Sea. There aren't so many geophones on this site, but the scientists combined the data from multiple geophones thanks to this new tech. They used a special trick called the memory effect to reverse the distortions that happen when seismic waves bounce off different underground materials and figure out what the original signals look like. The researchers could clearly see the structure inside the volcano down to a depth of about 6 miles, with incredibly detailed images in a resolution of over 300 feet. They found out that there are many layers of magma stored underground. These layers are connected to other deep parts of the Earth. Knowing about these layers and how they work could help scientists make better guesses about when a volcano might erupt. If they can do that, they might be able to warn people earlier and keep them safe from dangerous eruptions.
An earthquake in Indonesia began in 1829 and lasted a mighty 32 years. It reached its climax in 1861 and hit a magnitude of around 8.5. It was caused by the tectonic plates below the island slowly clashing against each other. Researchers discovered that the quake had been building for some time after analyzing the coral in the area. They found it was being periodically exposed to the open air. That was caused by the gradual earthquake moving the land up and down. Scientists call these decades-long silent earthquakes slow slip events. A single lightning bolt can warm the air to around 54,000 degrees Fahrenheit. The heat makes the air expand quickly, creating a shock wave or boom, which we know to be thunder. There are close to 3 trillion trees on Earth. That translates to roughly around 422 trees for every person. Before humans, the number was nearer to 6 trillion. Almost 70% of the Earth's surface is covered by water, which on average is around 2.5 miles deep. 97% of Earth's volcanoes lie underwater, as well as the mid-ocean ridge, a massive mountain range that is over 40,000 miles long. Humans have mined around 190,000 tons of gold from the planet. Experts predict there is around 20% still left to be mined, but this figure is constantly changing. The world's largest active volcano is in Hawaii. Called Mauna Loa, it's over 2.5 miles above sea level. Given that most of it is underwater, the volcano's summit is a staggering 11 miles from its base. That's the same length as over 160 football fields. The highest ever recorded temperature on Earth was a sweltering 136 degrees Fahrenheit. It was recorded in El Azizia, or modern-day Libya, on September 13th, 1922. The lowest temperature was a chilling minus 129 degrees Fahrenheit, recorded at Russia's Vostok station in 1983. Earth is the 5th largest planet in the solar system, behind Jupiter, Saturn, Uranus, and Neptune. It has a circumference of roughly 25,000 miles, and it would take the average person around 8,300 hours to walk around the face of the Earth. The separation between Earth's land masses would make such a trek almost impossible, though. It takes 365.25 days for the Earth to orbit the Sun. Because our calendar years only have 365 days, we add an extra leap day every 4 years to make up for the difference. Russia is the largest country on the planet, with a total area of about 6.5 million square miles. It encompasses more than 1/8 of the Earth's inhabited land area, but still has a relatively small population given its size. Earth is the only planet with one moon. Mercury and Venus have no moons, while every other planet has 2 or more. Earth is over 4 billion years old. Scientists calculate this by looking at the planet's oldest rocks, as well as meteorites that have crash-landed. They used meteorites as they were formed at the same time as Earth, when the solar system was forming. The ground we walk on is basically recycled. The planet's rock cycle turns igneous rocks to sedimentary ones, then transforms those into metamorphic rocks, and back again. Like Earth, our moon also experiences earthquakes. They're less common and intense than the ones we have, and are caused by tidal stresses. A tidal stress is basically the relationship between the gravitational pull of the moon on the Earth and that of the Earth on the moon. Despite being the 5th largest continent, Antarctica holds 70% of the planet's fresh water and about 90% of its ice. Bangkok is the most visited city in the world, boasting 23 million visitors in 2019 alone. Paris, London, Dubai, and Singapore make up the other cities in the top 5. The lowest layer of Earth's atmosphere is called the troposphere and is the reason we have weather. Sunlight heats the planet's surface, which causes warm air to rise up to the troposphere. This air then expands and cools as the air pressure decreases and sinks down, where it is then warmed by the Earth again. Coral reefs are the largest living structures on the planet, with some even being visible from space. Coral reefs hold the most species per area of any of Earth's ecosystems, even more than rainforests. Earth got its name around 1,000 years ago, and it comes from the German word meaning the ground, but there's no evidence to show who actually named it. Of all the planets, Earth is also the only one which is not named after a Greek or Roman deity. The deepest point of the ocean is the Mariana Trench. It's a whopping 7 miles below sea level. Coastlines cover about 20% of U.S. land, but are home to more than 50% of the U.S. population. The Earth isn't actually a sphere. It's more like a squished ball that bulges at the equator. The bulge is caused by the force of the Earth spinning, which makes the north and south poles slightly flat. The Earth spins on its axis, which is basically an imaginary straight line. Earth has seasons because the axis is tilted, causing the sun's rays to hit different parts of the planet more directly, depending on the time of year. If the sun was as tall as a standard door, the Earth would be around the size of a nickel. The Earth's rate of rotation is gradually decreasing. It's happening so slowly that it would take as much as 140 million years for the length of a day to increase to 25 hours.
Get equipped for any season with brand new Brightside merch. Click the link and grab your print.
The biggest animal on Earth is the Antarctic blue whale. It can reach lengths of 100 feet and weigh up to 400,000 pounds, which is around the same as 33 elephants. The temperature at the center of the Earth is around the same as the surface of the Sun, at almost 10,000 degrees Fahrenheit. Earth is around 10,000 times older than humans. Earth is around 4.5 billion years old, whereas humans have been around for, at most, 450,000 years. There are around 34,000 known species of fish. The actual number is way higher though, as a whopping 95% of our oceans still haven't been explored. America's Route 66 is longer than the journey to the Earth's core. The distance to the core is roughly 2,000 miles. Route 66 is almost 2,500 miles. The Earth is made up of 3 main components: the crust, the mantle, and the core, which is divided into the outer core and the inner core. Scientists have estimated that there are around 8.7 million species on the planet. Out of this, between 1 to 2 million of these species are animals. But roughly 86% of land species and 91% of fish have yet to be discovered by humans. Ancient astronomers used to think that the Earth was the center of the universe. For 2,000 years, they believed the Earth to be static, while other bodies traveled in orbit around us. In 1543, Copernicus published his sun-centered model of the solar system. Earth is the densest planet in the solar system. The density varies across its different crusts, but the planet's average density is just over 3 ounces per cubic inch. Mount Everest is the highest point on the planet. Its peak is the highest altitude above sea level at around 5.5 miles. Each year, 1 septillion crystals of snow fall on Earth. That's a trillion snowflakes. Snow covers about 31% of Earth's land area each year. Of Earth's water, only around 3% is fresh water. The other 97% is salted. Of that 3%, about 2% is frozen in ice and glaciers. So, less than 1% of the planet's fresh water is actually in lakes, rivers, and underground. The world's largest inland body of water, or lake to us normal people, is the Caspian Sea. It has an area of 140,000 miles squared. The world's deepest lake is Lake Baikal in Russia and is 5,300 feet deep. Earth's atmosphere is roughly 78% nitrogen and 21% oxygen, with small amounts of water vapor, carbon dioxide, and other gases. No other planet is believed to have this much oxygen, which explains why Earth is the only planet where life has been discovered, so far. Apart from the Moon, there are 2 asteroids in co-orbital orbits with Earth. sometimes called Earth's second moon. 3753 Cruithne is an asteroid that looks like it's following the Earth in orbit, but it's actually following its own path around the Sun. 2002 AA29 is another asteroid which makes a horseshoe orbit around the Earth that draws it close to the planet every 95 years.
Massive tsunamis, destructive tornadoes, giant meteorites, devastating earthquakes. Ooh, better have insurance. But all these are minor natural disasters compared with the eruption of a volcano. Some volcanoes can destroy a city, as it was with Pompeii, or some islands in the Pacific Ocean. But there's a dangerous type of eruption that can destroy all life on the planet. This type is called flood basalt. But first of all, let's figure out what a volcano is. Rivers of hot liquid metals and incandescent rocks flow deep inside our planet. And the deeper it gets, the hotter they are. The source of this hot mass is the mantle, which is the middle layer of Earth, located between the core and the crust. These fiery streams are called magma, and it flows everywhere. But we don't feel its heat because of the thick layer of our planet's crust. Magma is lighter than the crust, so it always tries to break out to the surface. And in some places, it succeeds. At the junctions of tectonic plates, it splashes out when one plate moves under a thicker one. When magma reaches the surface, it becomes lava. This substance burns the ground around and cools down quickly. It hardens and forms a new layer of rock. The following splash of magma falls on the top of this layer. Thus, a mountain appears layer by layer over millions of years. And in its mouth, a fault of tectonic plates splashes out magma. This mountain is called a volcano. It spits lava and ash into the sky, then falls asleep and wakes up again during seismic activity. Now imagine that several giant volcanoes begin to splash out an infinite amount of magma. It just doesn't end and covers an entire continent. This is a flood basalt, and one day it did happen. About 252 million years ago, in the northern part of our planet, a lot of magma accumulated under Earth's crust. Trillions of tons of hot rock were concentrated in one place on a gigantic territory. And gradually, all this fiery energy began to seep out of the ground. Hot gas started to come out in different places in this territory. The ground shook endlessly, and the crust rose hundreds of feet, all pointing to the approach of an imminent catastrophe. And then, at some point, magma began to pour out. Giant fountains of fire burst out of the ground. Do you know these geysers in Iceland? So imagine the same things, but dozens of times higher and with hot lava and ash instead of water and steam. The ash and lava flows were so strong that they reached the clouds. Under Earth's crust, there was a gigantic bubble of magma, and it squeezed out fiery jets under the pressure of rock and ground. The rift was getting bigger. Magma was flowing out everywhere. It began to fill the entire North Continent. The flood of lava spread wider and wider. The streams of molten rock seemed endless. Layers of molten basalt rock overlapped one another, forming a giant tsunami of lava 160 feet high. It poured out of the ground for hundreds of thousands of years, flooding forests, rivers, lakes, and meadows. At the same time, billions of tons of volcanic ash rose into the sky, which could lead to a volcanic winter, since sulfur dioxide in the ash reflected the sun's rays. This might have lowered the temperature on the continent by several degrees. Then, dust and ash probably condensed and formed giant clouds that watered the surface with toxic acid rain. But after that, the cooled lava formed a giant thick shield, preventing magma from seeping out of the endless fire bubble. The global catastrophe was over, but only for a short time. Trillions of tons of magma were still flowing under a thick layer of solid basalt. The fiery rivers couldn't reach the top, so they spread out to the sides. As a result of this expansion, huge nets were formed under the thick rock. They ran in different directions like a spider web and heated Earth's crust. Gases started coming out from under the surface again. More and more energy accumulated there, until an explosion of unimaginable force occurred. In addition to magma, carbon dioxide and ash escaped to the surface. They filled the atmosphere and caused the greenhouse effect. The temperature on the whole planet increased by several degrees. This release provoked another catastrophe that began in the ocean. There were deposits of methane, an explosive gas, on the seabed. Under ice-cold water, the methane was frozen and harmless. But the greenhouse effect in the atmosphere warmed up the entire ocean. Millions of tons of methane began to rise to the surface. This gas is more potent than carbon dioxide. Therefore, when it hit the atmosphere, the temperatures on Earth increased again. The whole globe turned into a hot sauna. In previous cool and humid places, the temperature reached those of a modern Sahara. Of course, most animals and insects couldn't survive such a cataclysm, but ocean life took much more damage. The heat and methane reduced the amount of oxygen in the ocean. Fish and other marine life couldn't survive in such conditions. New problems appeared when anaerobic bacteria started to multiply in non-oxygen water. They fed on methane and carbon dioxide and released hydrogen sulfide, a toxic substance that poisoned water even more. About 75% of land animals and 95% of the ocean's inhabitants went extinct. This flood basalt eruption was the only disaster in the planet's history that destroyed almost all plants and significantly reduced the insect population. Several species of the hardiest animals managed to survive in these conditions. The planet took about 10 million years to recover completely. After that, evolution began a new process of developing life. And here are two pieces of news. The bad one is that flood basalt will happen again and will be no less devastating than 252 million years ago. The good news is that it will happen in hundreds of millions of years. But when that happens, humanity will need to be prepared. It will start on the ocean floor. First, lava fountains miles high will begin boiling the water and emit sulfur dioxide into the atmosphere, where it will reflect sunlight. Along with ash and magma, a massive amount of water vapor will rise into the air. Livestock won't survive, and people will have breathing problems. Acid rain and increased humidity caused by the evaporation of the oceans will lead to the corrosion of buildings. All flights will be canceled. People will have to wear gas masks. Many animals won't be able to handle this eruption, but humans will adapt quickly. But then another and another eruption will follow, and this endless catastrophe will soon deplete the resources of humanity. Plants and trees won't recover so fast, and oxygen production will be significantly reduced. Let's hope that humanity will have colonized other planets, including those outside the solar system by that time. And now, let's jump back to the present. About 70% of the seismic activity associated with volcanoes occurs underwater. So let's see how ordinary volcanoes on the ocean floor work. Water, as well as land, rests on tectonic plates. Therefore, if their structure is broken at the joints, magma seeps through them. But unlike terrestrial volcanoes, lava here doesn't spread in different directions, burning everything it meets. It solidifies under the pressure of cold water. Underwater volcanoes can erupt for a long time with breaks in between. Magma covers the seabed. After another 100 or 1,000 years, a new eruption begins and a new layer of rock forms over the previous one. Over millions of years, layer by layer, magma is rising. And then, one day, a volcano rises out of the water. Magma splashes out of it and increases its height. And now we have a large volcanic island. Then the volcano falls asleep and life appears on the newly formed piece of land. Magma flows from the planet's mantle, filled with various chemical elements. This hot mix saturates the soil with useful substances and thus promotes the growth of plants and trees. Then birds and other animals arrive there, and the volcanic island turns into a paradise. Then humans arrive and pave over paradise to put up a parking lot and a franchise burger joint.
Hey, don't freak out. Those red waters you see aren't blood oceans. It's just a natural occurrence called the red tide. Red tides often happen in Florida, especially in the West Florida shelf, and they can stick around for weeks or even months. They're basically caused by an increase in algae levels, hence the color. Those algae produce toxins that can be harmful to marine life. They can also be bad news for us humans. causing symptoms like upset stomach and urgent bathroom trips, if you're picking up what I'm putting down. Volcanoes are super scary, but there's nothing scarier than getting taken out by a pyroclastic flow. These fiery flows move crazy fast and reach insane temperatures, like hotter than your oven on a pizza night. They're like a fireworks show of volcanic eruptions filled with ash, lava, and hot gas, speeding down mountains at 50 miles per hour. Some researchers claim they might even hit speeds of 450 miles per hour, almost as fast as a passenger jet. If you're unlucky enough to be in the path of a flow, you're in big trouble. The heat alone can turn you into a human barbecue, even if you try to hide in a building. The air around the flow can reach temperatures high enough to fry your insides, burn your clothes off, and leave metal melted into your skin, which almost sounds like a Marvel origin story. However, a lot of people have met their end because of these flows. But there's one crazy story about a guy named Luger Silbaris, still sounding like an origin story. So on the 7th of May, 1902, there was a major eruption on the island of Martinique. The night before, Silbaris had gotten into trouble and ended up in jail. Maybe this is a villain origin story. He'd been locked in a sturdy cell facing away from the volcano. The next morning, Mount Pella unexpectedly erupted, destroying St. Pierre within minutes. The flows wiped out around 30,000 people, but Silbaris survived in his cell and became known as the guy who lived through doomsday. The rescue team found him 4 days later. By the way, the cell still stands today. I hope somebody tested him for superpowers. Back on August 21st, 1986, a guy stumbled upon some animals showing no signs of life on his way to Nios village in Cameroon. To his shock, he later found out that everyone in the village had mysteriously passed away. The same thing happened at Lake Manaun in 1984. Turns out, those tragic incidents were caused by something called limnic eruptions, which are pretty rare disasters where carbon dioxide suddenly bursts out of lake waters, creating a hazardous gas cloud. These type of eruptions usually happen in lakes with high levels of CO2, which can be caused by things like volcanic gases and high pressure. Any little change in temperature or pressure can set off an eruption. So, experts have started looking into ways to safely release CO2 from lakes like Manaun and Nios in order to lower the risk of more disasters in the future. In March 2024, a video captured a terrifying moment of a woman disappearing into a sinkhole while browsing through a Chinese department store. Guess she got more than she bargained for. Ha ha ha. Moving on. The scene unfolded as the floor beneath her gave way, sending her plummeting into the abyss. In the midst of the chaos, another customer frantically ran away before returning to check on the woman who had fallen. Their quick thinking and the swift response of emergency crews and firefighters saved the day, resulting in only minor injuries for both women. I'm glad that lady checked on her because I would be gone. An anvil cloud is basically a big cloud made of ice particles that forms at the top of really tall thunderstorms, or those huge cumulonimbus clouds. The flat top shape is caused by the air rising in the storm and spreading out when it hits the stratosphere. That's why it's called an anvil. It looks like the tool metal workers use. Duh. The air from the anvil cloud is cooler than the stratosphere air, which keeps it from going any higher. You can spot anvil clouds from really far away, sometimes over 100 miles. Often you might see streaks of snow coming from the edge of the cloud known as virga. The snow disappears before hitting the ground because of the dry air. If you notice clouds poking through the flat top or bubbling up, it's an overshooting top, a sign of a super strong storm. Anvils are known for producing dangerous lightning. Normally, lightning comes from the bottom of a storm, but anvil clouds can produce really powerful lightning from the top. This lightning can strike out of nowhere, even from up to 30 miles away. So keep an eye on those anvil clouds if you see one forming nearby. Lahars are no joke. They're basically fast-moving, super dangerous streams of rock, ash, and water that come down the slopes of volcanoes. It's important for everyone to be aware of them. Scientists, policymakers, and even us regular folks. By understanding how lahars work and their potential impact, we can try to stay safe when volcanoes start acting up. Saving lives during natural disasters is the name of the game. There are two main types of lahars: debris lahars and mudflow lahars. Debris lahars are full of solid stuff like rocks and ash, while mudflow lahars are more waterlogged and sludgy. Lahars can be triggered by the rapid melting of snow or ice, heavy rain falling on loose volcanic material, or even a crater-like eruption. The volcano's characteristics and presence of water are key factors in how lahars form and move downhill. When lahars come barreling down mountains at speeds of up to 120 miles per hour, carrying loads of debris, it's a recipe for disaster. Unless you have a surfboard, but I doubt you'll have a surfboard on a volcano. Just saying. Also, it won't work. Going to the beach for a sunny vacation is the best. There's nothing like basking in the sun, feeling sand between your toes, and hearing waves crash against the shore. But even though it's all relaxing and picture perfect, always keep an eye on the water and never turn your back on the ocean. You may know about rip currents and tides, but have you ever heard of square waves? It's a real thing, and it can be pretty scary. Square waves, also known as cross seas, happen when two swells meet, forming a unique square pattern that looks like a checkerboard. They can be found along coastal areas, and while they are rare, they can create waves up to 10 feet high and make it tough for boats and swimmers to maneuver. If you find yourself in the water with square waves, you might feel like you're fighting against two different currents. The best thing to do is to not go too far out to begin with, and get out of the water as soon as the waves become too strong. Square waves are more dangerous for boats and ships, so it's best to stick to the shallow waters and stay safe. Whirlpools and maelstroms are powerful natural forces that have scared sailors for years. They happen when certain weather and current conditions come together just right. Most of them are safe if you stay away, but let's see what they really are and how they form. A whirlpool is basically water that starts spinning when two currents meet, or one current hits something solid like a wall. They can be big or small, depending on the speed of the water and waves. Most aren't dangerous, but there are also maelstroms, which are large, forceful, and violent whirlpools, caused by ocean tides and narrow straits. Tidal currents in places like Norway's Saltstraumen and Moxstraumen can create massive whirlpools. Scotland's Corribrecken whirlpool is one of the world's largest. Other examples of whirlpools can be found in Japan, Canada, and New Zealand. Are they portals? They're definitely not portals. Researchers have recently looked into ancient underwater volcanic eruptions and how they affected Earth's climate. They studied materials from Bronze Age eruptions to learn more about their scale, dangers, and impact on climate. For example, one eruption about 3,600 years ago in the Aegean Sea caused chaos in Santorini. The study focused on this event to understand its importance. By analyzing volcanic deposits, the researchers gained insights into how future eruptions could affect climate. They discovered that sediment waves from shallow underwater eruptions could lead to tsunamis and impact the ocean floor. These findings help us understand how underwater volcanic eruptions relate to the marine environment, which can help us predict climate changes in the future.
A 4-story wall of water that only rises once in 1,300 years was recorded off the west coast of Canada. Some people blame waves like this for disappearances in the Bermuda Triangle. Rogue waves can get strong enough to sink container ships and oil rigs. The Canadian water monster didn't hurt anyone, but it did become a sensation. And it looks like we're about to see even higher and more powerful rogue waves in the future. The team of Marine Labs, the company that operates the buoy that got caught in the Ucluelet wave, couldn't believe the data they saw. A huge force came out of the blue, pulled the buoy down, and then set it up to a peak before taking it even deeper. They thought it must be a rogue wave, so they sent the data to a scientist at the University of Victoria who specializes in these beauties. They analyzed the data and confirmed it was indeed not a technical mistake. The wave officially became the most extreme rogue wave ever officially recorded, as it was 3 times the height of waves around it. Scientists have reported seeing giant waves coming out of the blue for centuries. But no one really believed them. Back in 1826, a French scientist and naval officer was crossing the Indian Ocean on his ship, the Astrolabe. They got in a terrible storm and saw several waves over 98 feet tall. It's almost as tall as a 10-story building. The crew lost one of its members, but the four of them, including the captain, made it to land and shared what they saw. But back then, scientists were sure waves couldn't be taller than 30 feet. Everyone took their story as a tall tale. Pun intentional. Over a century later, a cargo ship, the MS München, mysteriously disappeared. People believed it to be unsinkable, just like the Titanic, so it was a real shock that all that was left of it was one lifeboat. When experts analyzed the damage, they concluded that it must have been hit by a wave that was around 65 feet high. Witnesses shared many other stories of giant waves coming out of nowhere, but scientists officially recognized the first rogue wave only in 1995. It went down in history as the Doppler wave, or the New Year's wave. This monster on the North Sea that was 84 feet tall hit the Norwegian gas platform Doppler on New Year's Day. It was twice larger than the wave surrounding it. The rig was built to withstand waves up to 64 feet tall and had the most advanced sensors for its time. The wave wasn't like any other type of wave they'd studied before. So they had to admit rogue waves were real and gave them an official definition. It's a wave more than twice as tall as others around it. It can pop up lightning fast in a stormy sea or show up out of nowhere in calm waters. These waves have steep sides and a deep trough below and look like a wall of water rising out of the sea. They're so intense that they can even swallow up rescue helicopters trying to do their job. In 2007, America's National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration made a list of 50 historical maritime tragedies that were most likely caused by rogue waves. Some of the events on the list happened not in the open water, but in lakes. Lake Superior has something that's got the name Three Sisters. It is a series of three large waves, one after another. The second wave covers the ship's decks before the first one is gone. The third wave jumps in and adds extra water. These three sisters overload the ship. There's a theory that this phenomenon took down the freighter Edmund Fitzgerald in 1975. There are two main theories trying to explain how rogue waves happen. First, we've got the linear addition theory. Imagine waves cruising through the ocean at their own speeds. When these waves cross paths, they team up and become stronger to turn into a rogue wave. Then there's the nonlinear focusing theory. It says waves like to roll in groups, and when they spend time together, they exchange some energy. Sometimes, this energy exchange turns into a rogue wave. To predict the formation of these freaky waves, scientists would need an innovative radar system to keep a constant eye on the waves near a boat. They'd collect all the data and put in a math model that would create a real-time picture of what the ocean surface looks like at that very moment. This model would need to do new calculations of the surface situation every 5 minutes. It would let the crew know if there were any extreme waves coming up in the next several minutes. Such a system doesn't exist yet, but there is a huge progress in this direction. Scientists from the University of Melbourne went on an expedition to Antarctica and found out that strong winds play a big role in the creation of rogue waves. It looks like they're caused by a mix of strong winds and the random way waves move and interact with each other. This idea was tested in labs before, but now they've proven it happens in real oceans too. To study these waves, the scientists use special 3D cameras. These cameras work like human eyes, taking lots of images in a row to create a detailed 3D picture of the ocean surface. It showed that rogue waves happen more often when waves are young, which means they're just starting to form and are more affected by the wind. When strong winds blow over young waves, they make the waves taller, longer, and faster, but not evenly. Some waves steal energy from nearby waves and grow much bigger, which is how rogue waves form. The scientists noticed these giant waves happened about once every 6 hours. They recorded no rogue waves in calmer seas when the wind doesn't have as much influence. Scientists are concerned that rogue waves may happen more often in the future because there's more energy in the atmosphere and ocean. It looks like rogue waves can be much more powerful than scientists ever thought. They managed to create the famous Doppler wave in a lab for the first time in 2018. This helped them study these mysterious waves up close and showed that their secret is in how they form. We think of waves rolling gently on a beach, but the waves in this study happen in open water when waves from different directions meet. When waves come together from far apart directions, they push the water upward, creating what's called a partially standing wave or a cross wave. This can happen when two seas meet, or when wind directions suddenly change, like during a hurricane. The study found that the bigger the angle between the meeting waves, the taller the cross wave becomes. Normally, when a wave breaks, it forms a white foamy top, and that's where it stops growing. But if a wave is formed by water coming from many directions, it can keep growing even after breaking. These special waves can grow to be twice as steep while breaking, which is already much bigger than normal waves. And if you add up all the growth from waves coming together, they can become 4 times steeper than what anyone thought was possible. This discovery could change the way we build things, like wind turbines or oil platforms in the ocean, to make them safe. Right now, many designs don't fully account for these huge multi-directional waves. Now, they seem to have a lot of similarities, but rogue waves aren't the same as tsunamis. Tsunamis happen when there's a big shift in water, like an earthquake, volcanic eruption, or landslide. They mess with the entire water column. At sea, you might not even notice a tsunami cruising beneath you, but near the shore, as it hits shallow waters, those waves can shoot up to crazy heights. Rogue waves are formed at the surface level, although sometimes they can form deep below, and these are called rogue internal waves.
Now, if you could get into a time machine and travel back to 1969, you'd see something spectacular. What you're looking at isn't some random desert. It's one of the most powerful waterfalls, completely dry. In the summer and fall of 1969, the American side of Niagara Falls stayed without water. It lasted 6 months. Researchers wanted to study the rock face of the falls. They were afraid it was going to become too unstable because of erosion. Erosion is the process when natural forces, such as water and wind, wear away earthen materials. For example, if you see glacial ice become muddy, it means erosion is happening. 3 waterfalls that cross the international border between Canada and the United States together make something we know as the magnificent Niagara Falls. The 3 waterfalls are the Horseshoe Falls, the American Falls, and the Bridal Veil Falls, in order from largest to smallest. The American Falls are fully on the American side, while the Horseshoe Falls are primarily on the Canadian side, divided by Goat Island. The Bridal Veil Falls, the smallest of them all, are on the American side, but separated from the others by Luna Island. Don't America and Canada have a cool natural border? Many didn't believe we could actually go against wild nature and stop such insane amounts of water from flowing. But we did it. It took a 600-foot dam across the enormous Niagara River to really shut down these astonishing falls. This means they had to divert 60,000 gallons of water every second so that the remaining flow traveled over the biggest Horseshoe Falls, the ones that are completely on the Canadian side of the border. Over 27,000 tons of rock were used to construct that dam, and more than 1,000 trucks carried that rock back in the hot summer of '69. On June 12th, the American Falls stopped after their continuous flow for more than 12,000 years. So the Horseshoe Falls then took the extra flow and absorbed it so that research could be done. But the locals were still worried. They knew it wasn't possible to control such amounts of water. They were afraid the water might take a different route and cause a catastrophic flood. They were worried that tourists wouldn't come anymore if teams didn't manage to make the waterfall flow again the way it used to. But tourists kept coming even that summer, and they got a unique chance to see something no one had ever seen before or after. During that period, there was even a temporary walkway built only 20 feet away from the edge of the now dry falls. It helped workers to clean the bottom of what used to be a river, so tourists could go there and explore the wild landscape of the falls that was usually under the water, hostile, and not accessible to visitors at all. As they were exploring the dried bottom of the falls, researchers stumbled upon millions of different coins people had thrown in the water over decades, maybe to make a wish or for some other purpose. Wow, a Niagara Falls piggy bank! well, they removed most of those coins. I wonder who got them. But in the past couple of decades, more and more tourists have been coming here. Imagine all the things they could find now. More coins, of course, but also lost cameras, errant drones, cell phones, and other things careless visitors could accidentally drop in the waterfalls. The idea of removing all the water and turning Niagara Falls into a desert proved to be possible, but it may need to be done again. In 2020, the media reported that 2 pedestrian bridges in Niagara Falls needed to be either replaced or repaired. No wonder, since they're almost 120 years old. These bridges are located above the rapids. Experts discuss whether they should divert the water once again or not. People talk about Niagara Falls a lot, and some believe they're among the tallest waterfalls in the world. But the truth is, they're not. They're famous, precious, and breathtaking. But when it comes to height, there are nearly 500 other waterfalls across the globe that are taller than Niagara. Let's take Angel Falls in Venezuela, for example. They're more than 3,000 feet tall. But what makes Niagara Falls so special, among other waterfalls, is the amount of water that flows over them. Very high waterfalls don't usually have great amounts of water. The combination of all those huge amounts of water and the height is what makes Niagara Falls so breathtaking. Also, they might be some of the fastest-moving waterfalls on our planet. The Niagara River appeared after the last ice age, together with the whole Great Lakes Basin. The Niagara River is part of it. 18,000 years ago, I wasn't around then, this awesome waterfall didn't exist. Ice sheets covered the area of southern Ontario. They were 1 to 2 miles thick. As the ice sheets were moving southward, they created the basin of the Great Lakes. Then they melted, releasing enormous amounts of water into the basins. Generally, the water we drink is fossil water. Only 1% of it renews through the year, with the remaining 99% coming from ice sheets. The Niagara Peninsula hasn't been beneath the ice for nearly 12,500 years. As the ice melted, the resulting water started to flow down through what later turned into Niagara River, Lake Erie, and Lake Ontario. It took a lot of time, but the water eventually eroded cliffs and formed these spectacular falls. Now, you might have noticed that the Niagara River is amazingly green. This specific color tells us how powerful the water is when it comes to erosion. Every minute, Niagara Falls spews over 60 tons of dissolved minerals. All that, together with dissolved salt and finely ground rock, makes the color so magnificent. People who live in the United States and Canada, or more precisely, over 1 million people who have access to the area, use the waters of Niagara River for different purposes. For example, fishing, getting drinking water, doing recreational activities, including swimming, boating, and birdwatching, producing hydroelectric power, and so much more. Now, the first hydroelectric generating station in the world was built at the end of the 19th century, and it was right next to the falls. Pretty soon it started paying off because people were getting electricity from it. But this electricity could travel only 300 feet, so something needed to be improved there. Nikola Tesla was the one who took up the challenge and made the necessary changes. He discovered that electricity could travel long distances if an alternating current was used. Today, several Niagara Falls power plants provide over 2 million kilowatts of power. Okay, I'll tell you another interesting thing. 1969 wasn't the only time when Niagara Falls stopped. Back in 1848, the water didn't flow over the falls for up to 40 hours. Now, the falls were already very popular among tourists and a useful source of energy for local people, so no wonder they freaked out. Nature was to blame this time. Ice blocked the source of the Niagara River. An American farmer was the first one to notice it. It was March 29th, and he went for a walk right before midnight. Soon, he realized he couldn't hear the powerful roar of the falls. He quickly went to the edge of the river and stood there in shock. There was hardly any water. Factories and mills had to shut down because they depended on that water. Turtles were just wandering around. Fish didn't survive. Some people took a walk on the river bottom, taking little things they could find there as souvenirs. But 2 days later, on March 31st, people heard a distant rumbling coming from upriver. It was getting nearer and louder until a wall of water appeared in front of their eyes. And one of the world's greatest attractions that millions of tourists visit every year was back in business again. Magnificent and, in the end, invincible. As it should be.
Your kitchen sink is filled with dirty water. You've just washed the dishes, and you pull the plug out of the drain hole. Do you see how the water forms a funnel, and all the pieces of food get into its center? This is a small whirlpool. Now imagine that this is not a kitchen sink, but a sea with a several feet wide whirlpool. And it draws in not pieces of food, but a small boat. And you're on this boat. You jump off the side and try to swim away, but the whirlpool is stronger than you. It attracts you despite your attempts to swim away. So the first thing you should do is calm down. Yeah, it isn't easy when the deep sea is trying to swallow you up, but if you don't save your strength, you won't be able to survive. And now remember one life hack. Do not try to swim in the opposite direction when the current from the shore carries you away. Head to the side. Thus, you escape from the stream sooner or later and can safely swim to the beach. Inside the whirlpool, you have to act similarly. You need to stop struggle and swim in the direction of the flow. Thus, you'll keep your energy and increase your speed. But don't swim at the very center of the vortex. Try to move away from it in the last moment and you'll get out. Now go to the surface and stay away from the whirlpool. Great! You have survived. You promise yourself never to go to sea again without a life jacket. But of course, the best way to escape from the whirlpool is not to get caught. If you're going on a sea cruise or kayaking at the mouth of the river, find out all about these places. Perhaps they are filled with water traps. You swim to the shore and decide to learn all about whirlpools. It forms in the sink or bathtub because the water begins to drain into the hole and swirl. There are no drain holes in the sea, lake, river, or ocean, and water is formed there because of the collision of two currents. A strong wind can only create one current. The difference in water temperature and its density can make another. Also, the current can be caused by tides. This is when the moon's gravity affects the water. So when two currents flowing in different directions meet, they form a vortex. Two streams of water swirl around each other and move down in a spiral, creating an empty space in the center. Most of the whirlpools are too small and don't pose a danger. But if the water vortex is strong and large, it can sink ships. Such strong whirlpools are called maelstroms. They are usually formed when two currents collide near narrow reservoirs and straits. The world's largest and most dangerous maelstrom is located in the Saltstraumen Strait in northern Norway. Every 6 hours, a whirlpool forms there with a diameter of about 33 feet wide and 16 feet deep. And it can be several whirlpools formed at once. Ships sailing through the bay follow a strict schedule to avoid falling into the water trap. This whirlpool got into the Guinness Book of Records as the largest in the world. However, some whirlpools are hundreds of times bigger, but they are invisible. Giant whirlpools in the Arctic Ocean can reach 18 miles in length. This is the size of a city, and these giant whirlpools are invisible. Fortunately, they are not as dangerous as those that form in Norway. The waters of the Arctic and Atlantic Oceans mix and form water vortexes invisible to satellites. Usually scientists notice such whirlpools with the help of thermal imagers or a change in the color of the water. When the current filled with marine life mixes with lifeless waters, it is visible from the satellite. But the new giant whirlpools are masked under a layer of water with the same temperature. They hide deep enough not to be noticed by satellite thermal imagers. Scientists manage to catch them using gliders. These small pilotless submarines float underwater and record information about the temperature and salt level. Scientists discovered that these whirlpools formed because of the collision of cold and warm currents. Warm water here is rich in nutrients, while cold water is almost lifeless. In this way, warm currents share useful elements and spread them evenly throughout this region of the ocean. Observing invisible whirlpools can help scientists uncover many details about the structure of ocean ecosystems. Whirlpools exist not only in water but also in space. Vortexes from the plasma energy of the sun can be several times wider than the radius of our planet. However, all this solar radiation cannot create giant vortexes on Earth because the magnetic field protects us. The solar wind glides past the planet's atmosphere like a wind over the ocean surface. But a little energy still manages to break through the protection. Solar whirlpools insert an electrified gas into the magnetic field, creating holes through which the sun's plasma passes through the atmosphere. If whirlpools happen during the collision of different currents, it means that you can predict their appearance in advance. But there are unpredictable natural phenomena in the seas and oceans that pose a danger for small boats, yachts, giant ships, and oil rigs. The phenomenon is called a rogue wave. So now let's get aboard your yacht and sail somewhere in the ocean. It doesn't matter what ocean and where exactly you are, because rogue waves can appear anywhere. A small storm is starting, but your boat can easily handle it. The wind raises small waves that beat against the hull of your yacht. But then, among these waves, one giant appears several times larger than all the others. It would quickly turn your vessel over like a paper ship. But fortunately, this wave passes by and dissolves into the sea. This unpredictable wave of enormous power can destroy huge ships in a second, and such disasters have happened many times. Sailors all over the world told each other stories about the giant waves that appear during a storm and in a quiet sea. Many considered such waves only fairy tales, such as legends about the Kraken and Atlantis. But at the end of the 20th century, people were able to capture this sea phenomenon with a laser detector that measured the size of the wave. On January 1st, 1995, a massive rogue wave crashed into an oil station in the Norwegian North Sea. There was a storm that day, with big waves about 40 feet long. At some point, they formed a big guy, an 85-foot wave. That day, rogue waves turned from a fairy tale into reality. Researchers estimated that this natural phenomenon may destroyed about 22 supercarriers only in the second half of the 20th century. Also, scientists discovered that just 1 in 10,000 waves is a rogue one, and every year, their height increases by 1%. Some of the largest rogue waves reached a height of 100 feet. It's like a 10-story building. This giant can easily break even the strongest and largest ship. Scientists can't always predict their appearance, and still don't know their nature. So rogue waves make the ocean a much more dangerous place than we thought. According to one version, rogue waves appear because strong winds create big waves. When two such waves collide with each other, a giant rogue wave may appear. Another theory says that eddies create rogue waves. These eddies form along the edges of the ocean currents, and then they drift separately for a long time, increasing kinetic energy and forming eddies field. The kinetic energy contained in these fields can charge the waves and increase their strength. However, scientists study microwaves and light to understand this phenomenon better. It turned out that these sea waves are similar in their behavior to these two natural things. The researchers hope studying light waves will help understand the nature of rogue waves.
The snowpack over your head splits in two right in front of your eyes and starts tumbling down in the frozen slope to its resting place far, far below. Anything in its way is crushed under the immense mass of snow and debris. You're witnessing an avalanche, one of the most dangerous natural disasters. But what if I tell you about another kind of avalanche, no less blood-chilling than the mountain one? And the most bizarre thing about it is that it occurs underwater. Underwater avalanches are powerful and disastrous natural phenomena, often much more dangerous than land ones. They have the potential to wreak havoc on the entire planet, leading to catastrophic consequences. The most alarming thing? They occur all the time under the surface of the ocean, impossible to see, predict, and extremely difficult to measure. Such avalanches can get 100 times larger than land ones, and they pose a great risk to the world's communications, capable of leaving the entire planet without the internet. But we'll talk about it a bit later. First, let's go 60,000 years back into the past. We're near the northwest coast of Africa, ready to witness the colossal scale and devastating impact of a ginormous underwater avalanche. It started as a quite small underwater landslide in the Agadir Canyon. At first, it was just 0.35 cubic miles of material, but in no time, This mass increased more than 100 times in size while traveling across the Atlantic Ocean floor. As the avalanche sped up and grew, it picked up gravel, sand, rocks, and mud. It carved a devastating path through one of the world's largest submarine canyons, wiping out all forms of animal and plant life on its way. The disastrous flow was so powerful that it literally eroded a 250-mile stretch of the canyon, cutting hundreds of feet into its sides and damaging a total area of 1,740 square miles. That's the area of more than 3.5 New York cities. As for the force of the flow, it was so immense that it propelled massive boulders up the canyon walls to heights of up to 430 feet. Before scientists discovered the evidence of this catastrophic event, they had seriously underestimated the scale of destruction caused by submarine avalanches. By the way, these devastating catastrophes can start not only far away in the ocean, but also at estuaries. Let's go back to 14 January 2020 and see for ourselves. A turbidity current, a rapid, downhill flow of water containing a lot of sediment, rushed more than 680 miles from the Congo River estuary in the deep sea. This current appeared due to two factors: terrible flooding along the Congo River in late December 2019 and unusually large spring tides. This resulted in an avalanche of sand and mud. Its volume was equivalent to 1/3 of all the sediment produced annually by all the rivers in the world. This sediment avalanche accelerated, increasing in speed from 17 feet per second in the upper part of the Congo Canyon to 26 feet per second when it reached the end of the channel, almost 700 miles away from the coastline. This route made it the longest avalanche of sediment ever measured on our planet. 2 days later, the flow reached the deep ocean. The avalanche broke 2 seabed telecommunication cables, cutting internet data speeds all the way across West, Central, and South Africa. Now, before this disaster, scientists considered that measuring powerful deep-sea avalanches was impractical. But the sediment flow in the Congo Canyon could be monitored directly, finally allowing researchers to assess how major river floods connected to the deep sea. They also concluded that how often underwater avalanches occurred depended on where the observer was. Seafloor canyons that are close to river mouths can experience several tiny avalanches per year. Other systems, far from river discharges like the Agadir Canyon, can only have one monster of an avalanche every 10,000 years or so. You're likely wondering, what can trigger an avalanche under the surface of the ocean? Well, earthquakes, typhoons, high tides, river floods, and even volcanic eruptions. And due to our changing climate, such events become more and more frequent and intense. At the same time, these triggers don't mean that an avalanche is bound to happen, nor do they relate to the scale of the event. See for yourself. In 1755, a powerful earthquake hit the coast of Portugal, wiping out large parts of Lisbon. Tens of thousands of people lost their lives during that disaster, but it only triggered a tiny underwater avalanche. And in 1929, a large earthquake off the coast of Newfoundland, Canada, triggered the largest underwater avalanche ever recorded. The flow traveled at a speed of 42 miles per hour, carrying boulders, sand, and mud. It snapped 11 seabed cables on its journey downhill. The avalanche was so powerful, it produced a tsunami that claimed the lives of 28 people along the coastline. Now, submarine avalanches are totally invisible because they happen deep under the ocean surface, which makes them extremely hard to study. But we must find a way because these flows are super important. They transport sediments, nutrients, and even pollutants across the ocean floor. So, a research team from Liverpool decided to unravel this mystery. Over the last 40 years, they've collected more than 300 samples from the ocean floor. Combined with seismic and bathymetric data, which is a fancy word for ocean mapping, they managed to reconstruct a massive submarine avalanche. It was the first time an underwater avalanche of this size was mapped out. An even cooler thing, the event itself started off pretty modestly. but it quickly evolved into a colossal avalanche that grew to more than 650 feet tall. To put that into perspective, imagine a skyscraper-sized avalanche zooming from Liverpool to London, cutting a trench 100 feet deep and 9 miles wide. Then it spread out over an area bigger than the UK, covering it with several feet of sand and mud. That's like burying a whole country. These findings are actually a big deal because they show that even a small underwater landslide can turn into something massive and super destructive. But that's not the worst. Think about undersea internet cables, which are essential for global communication. There are more than 550 active seafloor cables around the world. Their combined length is a whopping 870,000 miles. That's enough to wrap around our planet 35 times. When a submarine avalanche breaks seafloor cables, the effects are usually super expensive and devastating. For example, in 2006, an earthquake in Taiwan triggered underwater avalanches that cut loads of seafloor cables connecting Southeast Asia with the rest of the world. The largest internet operator in China had a 90% loss of traffic to the USA at the peak of the event. As for Taiwan itself, it experienced between 74 to 100% loss in traffic to neighboring islands. So now you probably get why we need to learn more about this natural phenomenon. Luckily, researchers at Tulane University have found a way to study it in 3D. Previous studies only looked at submarine avalanches in 2D, which didn't give the full picture of how they actually behaved. The new research focused on how underwater flows interacted with mini basins, natural features on the ocean floor that look like shallow bowls. Despite being called mini, these bowls can be huge, up to 4 square miles. When turbidity currents flow into these mini basins, they don't just stop. No, they hit the far side and curl back around like water eddies in a stream. These swirling flows move the sediment around before it settles on the ocean floor. The size of the mini basin and the speed of the flow can change how the current behaves. If the basin is big and the current is slow, it starts to fill up with sediment. But if you crank up the flow speed or shrink the basin, the current starts to overflow, spilling over the basin. To study all this, the researchers created a mini version of a mini basin in a pool and used different speeds of flow to simulate turbidity currents. They even made their own sediment mixtures to see how different sizes of particles would behave. In the end, they managed to mimic real-life ocean conditions, but on a smaller, manageable scale. Pretty cool, huh?
The sea is kind of rough today. Nothing special, but still, you have that sinking feeling in your stomach. Call it a sense of foreboding. Something bad is going to happen, and then you hear terrified shouts. You turn around and see a giant wave, much higher than the one surrounding it. Is it a tsunami? That's true. When people think of frightening, destructive waves, tsunamis are the first thing to come to mind. But the one that is going to crash against your ship has a different nature. It's a rogue wave. Both tsunamis and rogue waves can lead to catastrophic consequences, but the difference lies in what causes these walls of water and where the destruction they bring about occurs. So, imagine a giant 60-foot tall wave rolling over your ship. It's a miracle that the vessel doesn't sink. This massive wave, a rogue wave, seems to have appeared out of the blue, very suddenly and unexpectedly. But however mysterious, solitary, and ominous rogue waves may seem, they're actually not that rare. Now, imagine the average room in your house. The ceiling there is likely 8 feet high. A typical 2-story house is somewhere between 20 and 30 feet high. And the Statue of Liberty is 111 feet tall if we measure it from the toes to the top of the head. Now you have something to compare rogue waves with. The largest of such waves can reach a height of 50 to 90 feet. To be considered rogue, a wave must appear seemingly out of nowhere and be higher than other waves in the area. But how much higher is still under debate. Some experts think it should be at least twice as high as other large waves in the area, while others disagree.
Rogue waves are also steeper than regular waves, which normally take the form of massive swells. This allows ships to maneuver up and down such waves, even when they're really high. A rogue wave, however, looks like a wall of water, and since it's steeper than other waves, it slams into a ship with enormous force, sometimes breaking over the vessel. Another reason why rogue waves are a mystery is that no one has ever filmed the formation of such a wave and followed its life cycle. There are several photos of rogue waves, but for many centuries, the only evidence of their existence was legends and stories told by sailors who survived them. Scientists are still not sure how rogue waves form, but one theory involves wave reinforcement. It happens when two waves interact and their heights get combined. So when a 15-foot wave passes over a 30-foot one, let's do the math. It results in a short-living 45-foot wave. But rogue waves can occur not only in the ocean. On November 10, 1975, on Lake Superior, a group of 3 rogue waves, also known as the Three Sisters, might have sunk the SS Edmund Fitzgerald, an American Great Lakes freighter. The ship and the crew members were lost in the catastrophe. The waves followed each other too closely, so the ship couldn't recover and shed the water from the first wave before the following one struck. The captain of a ship that was not far from the Fitzgerald reported that his vessel had been hit by 2 30 to 35-foot waves. These waves, likely followed by a third one, then moved further in the direction of the Fitzgerald and might have caused the sinking. Now, let's wave bye-bye to that, and let's move on to tsunamis. It is an extremely dangerous natural disaster. It's very different from rogue waves. In most cases, a tsunami is caused by an underwater earthquake. Usually, when a tsunami is born, it's just a few feet high. But the closer it gets to the shore, the larger it grows. Soon it enters shallow waters and starts to slow down. The first tsunami wave crashes against the shore. Its top moves faster than the bottom, and that's what makes the wave so high and steep. The lowest point of the wave gets to dry land first. In the process, it creates a vacuum effect that pulls the water away from the coast, burying the harbor and seafloor. Those who recognize this first sign of an approaching tsunami still have a chance to save their lives. 5 minutes later, an enormous wall of water hits the shore and wipes out everything in its way. But it's not just a single wave, there are many. This phenomenon is called a wave train. How fast this train is traveling depends not on how far it is from the source of the waves, but on the ocean depth. Tsunamis can move as fast as a jet plane in the middle of the ocean, but once they enter shallow waters, their speed drops. The first tsunami wave isn't usually the strongest, but lots of people don't know it and make the grave mistake that sometimes costs them their lives. After the first wave is gone, they relax and believe the danger is over. That's why the next waves, much bigger and more powerful, catch them off guard. Now sometimes a tsunami comes as a torrent of foaming water. At other times, it makes the sea withdraw, leaving behind stranded fish and overturned boats. Also, if you spot a slight rise in sea level, it might be the sign of an approaching tsunami. The incoming water is the first tsunami wave. The second one can be even larger, and it comes sometime later. You can also notice seawater bubbling, swirling, and creating bizarre patterns. It's another sure sign a tsunami is near. Repeated wave surges can also warn you about a tsunami. If you see unusual swells coming at regular intervals, it might be time to evacuate to high ground. Surprisingly, some of the largest tsunami waves in the world were caused by landslides. For example, a landslide in Lituya Bay in Alaska formed a megawave, one of the largest ever recorded. Its height was 1,720 feet. The mega tsunami surged over the headland, washing away trees, plants, and soil down to bedrock. The wave reached more than half the height of the Burj Khalifa, the tallest construction in the world. When a third of the East Molokai volcano in Hawaii caved in and collapsed into the Pacific Ocean, it triggered a tsunami the size of one of the tallest buildings in the world, Shanghai Tower. The wave was around 2,000 feet high. Another bizarre and dangerous ocean phenomenon is square waves. They appear when two different wave patterns crash into each other at 90 degrees. It often happens near peninsulas or land where two different seas or oceans meet. This phenomena does kind of look spectacular, but only if you're watching it from the shore. Don't even think about getting in the water to play with such waves. Cross currents in that spot can easily pull even a skilled swimmer under the water. Square waves have caused many shipping accidents over the years, too. And if you see wild, choppy waves carrying ocean debris and seaweed, stay out of the water, too. It can be a sign of a strong rip current. That can carry you far away into the ocean. And now, let me tell you about a much larger, I would even say planet-wide phenomenon called Rossby waves. There are two kinds of such waves, oceanic and atmospheric. But since we're talking about ocean waves, yeah. Slow-moving Rossby waves are totally different from ocean surface waves. They don't look like those waves that break along the shore. No, Rossby waves are giant movements of the ocean stretching horizontally across the planet. They can span hundreds of miles in a western direction and are so massive they can change the climate conditions of our planet. They contribute to high tides and even flooding in some areas all over the world. The movement of Rossby waves are complicated and depend on the location. For example, in the Pacific, waves that are closer to the equator take from a few months to a year to travel across the ocean. At the same time, waves further away from the equator often need more than 10 years to make this journey. So, as it goes by, be sure to wave. 11,000 years ago, give or take, the most famous desert in the world, the Sahara, was all green and alive, with lakes, rivers, grasslands, and forests. Several thousand years later, it all changed. But then, in 1877, a Scottish businessman, Donald Mackenzie, got the ambitious idea to create a sea right in the middle of the Sahara Desert. Mackenzie thought he could dig a channel from a lagoon near Cape Juby in northwestern Africa south to a large island plain. He thought this area was very low, about 200 feet below sea level. If he flooded it with water from the Atlantic Ocean, he believed it would create a giant inland sea, about the size of 60,000 square miles. His idea was to use the new sea for commercial navigation to West Africa, which had plenty of valuable resources and markets with huge profits. Even though Mackenzie had never visited the Sahara himself, he read about other dry desert areas below sea level, like Tunisia and Egypt, which had salt lakes called chats. But the businessman was wrong about how elevated the plain was and didn't receive enough investment, so he didn't bring his project to life. A French geographer named François L. Roder and a diplomat who developed the Suez Canal came up with a similar idea a year later. Roder was inspired by Greek historian and geographer Herodotus, who mentioned the Bay of Triton in his writings. It's sort of an Atlantis of Africa, as there is no proof it really existed and no one can tell where exactly it was located. The salt plain could have been the seabed of the Bay of Triton, and they could bring this sea back to life. So the French crew thought they could dig a channel from the Mediterranean Sea into a seasonal salt lake in present-day Tunisia. Water would flow into dry basins and create an inland sea. They were hoping it would be around 3,000 square miles in area and 75 feet deep. It would definitely require a huge amount of water. The new sea was supposed to turn the dry desert into a flourishing garden. The climate in the area would become cooler, and there would be more rainfall in the region. And here comes the best part for the French. They'd replace trade caravans with steamships and generate more profit. The cost of this project would be almost $1 billion in today's money. Some people got worried that this new sea would create swamps full of dangerous bacteria. The French authorities stopped the project when they found out that many areas that would be involved were not below sea level, and the plan was just impossible. Now, some people were also afraid it could tilt the Earth on its axis in a dangerous way, or cool down Europe to the point there would be a new ice age. But the idea lived on, and most recently, Egypt was considering flooding the Qattara Depression in eastern Sahara
through a canal or tunnels from the Mediterranean Sea. Water would evaporate quickly because of the desert climate, and a controlled balance of inflow and evaporation would let them generate huge amounts of hydroelectric power. But the project involved using atomic power to carve the new channel, and it didn't come to be. Famous writer Jules Verne described the flooding of the Sahara in his final novel, Invasion of the Sea. In the book, the scientists didn't proceed with their plans to turn the desert into a sea, but an earthquake did the job for them. So if the book comes to life, we might go swimming at a new Sahara sea resort in the future. Another massive flooding project has to do with Lake Erie in Australia. When it fills up completely, it becomes the largest lake on the continent. It happens only a few times a century, and when it does, the lake has the same salinity as seawater. When it dries up, it becomes extra salty. There was an idea to flood Lake Erie with seawater using a big canal or pipeline. It was supposed to make more water evaporate, and it could bring more rain to nearby areas. But when scientists did their math, they saw that the extra rainfall would be very small. It is so tricky because Lake Erie is below sea level, and the area gets really hot, so lots of water evaporates every year. This means salt would build up very quickly, and the canal could get blocked by all the salt. If a big canal sent water to the lake, it could create a small sea, but without removing the salty water, the lake would collect tons of salt every year. In 1930, several British scientists suggested freeing 100,000 square miles of the North Sea from water. Huge dams were supposed to stop the water, and rivers flowing into that sea would be diverted somewhere else through canals. There would be a railroad connecting London to Berlin and a bridge across the English Channel. Antwerp and London would keep their access to the sea, and Rotterdam would lose its busy port. This idea never became a reality, but quite recently, one Dutch and one German scientist came up with a similar project. Their idea is to build a dam that would be 295 miles long between North Scotland and West Norway, and another section between West France and southwest England. The scientists did some math and figured out that the project would cost somewhere between $276 and $552 billion. Sounds like a lot of money, but it could save around 25 million people living in 14 European countries from high water. So if we spread that budget over 20 years, the cost would be 0.1% of their combined GDP. And although it looks like science fiction, we already have the technology to build something like that. The depth of the North Sea between France and England is hardly over 328 feet and is around 416 feet between Scotland and Norway. We can already build fixed platforms in depth over 1,600 feet, so it should be fine. This project would turn most of the North Sea into a huge freshwater lake with no tides, and it would mean huge changes in its ecosystem. Plus, it would become more expensive to ship goods across this sea. The fishing industry would lose huge amounts of money, and it would also cost a lot to build huge pumps to transfer all of the river water that currently flows into the North Sea to the other side of the dam. So, the best that scientists can do is monitor the situation and hope there won't be a need for such a dam. Meanwhile, a German architect and engineer came up with another huge dam idea in the 1930s. It was supposed to completely change the inside of Africa with giant inland seas. The plan was to build a huge dam on the Congo River where it flows through some deep, narrow valleys after joining with the Kwa River. This would create a massive lake that would be bigger than the states of California, Nevada, and Oregon combined. Once this giant lake filled up, it would overflow into another river, which would then pour into the Sherry River, one of the rivers that feeds Lake Chad. Lake Chad would grow much larger, just like it was believed to be 10,000 years ago. The water would flow from the lake through Algeria and Tunisia right into the Mediterranean Sea. This new river would be big enough for ships to travel. It could replace trains or planes and would make it much easier to move goods and people across Africa. Back then, people didn't think much about how this could hurt nature and focused on how it would help the economy. Picture a mountainous landscape covered with winding roads. It looks beautiful, but traveling along such routes takes far too much time. Do you know what they did in China, in the province of Guizhou? They simply blew up a massive mountain range and built a bridge. But this is not just a bridge. It's a true marvel of engineering. So let's take a drive across it. Locals say there's not a single flat piece of land in Guizhou. More than 90% of the region consists of mountains and hills. All of this is beautiful and picturesque, but it creates serious logistical problems. It's one thing to come here as a tourist and enjoy the views, and quite another to live here and drive to work every day. People had to take long routes along winding roads and steep slopes. A car trip could take around 2 hours. But engineers built a bridge that reduced this travel time to just 120 seconds. They literally split a mountain in half, creating a V-shaped cut through the rock. Then they laid a road through the mountain range and led it onto a high bridge spanning a massive canyon. The entire route is constructed so precisely that drivers barely notice the moment when the road through the mountain ends and the bridge begins. Its total length is 9,500 feet. That's roughly 1/3 of the height of Mount Everest. But the length is not as impressive as the height. The Huajiang Canyon Bridge is considered the highest bridge in the world. Just imagine driving at a height of about 2,000 feet above the ground. That's almost 6 times higher than the Statue of Liberty. But this isn't just a road, it's also a major tourist attraction. So, what can the tourists do on the bridge? Just walk and enjoy the view? Well, that's only a small part. There's a panoramic glass elevator that connects the highway with the base of the canyon. You can have lunch in a special 2-story cafe located inside one of the bridge towers, offering an incredible view. There's an artificial waterfall and a glass pedestrian walkway in the lower part of the parking area. But the coolest part is the extreme activities, like a platform for bungee jumping. You hook yourself to a bungee cord and leap into the abyss. No thanks. And for true adrenaline lovers, professional base jumping competitions are held here too. You leap from an enormous height with a parachute or a wingsuit and soar through the canyon at an incredible speed, like a hawk. It sounds amazing, and you probably already want to come here and post a few photos. But how did they build it, and how safe is it? From the outside, it looks like a thin metal strip suspended at a terrifying height. The entire structure is supported by steel cables and panels, with a total weight of about 22,000 tons. In fact, the amount of steel used to build this bridge is 3 times greater than that used to construct the Eiffel Tower. The main cables of the bridge are anchored directly into solid rock, so the bridge won't collapse. But if something does go wrong, the builders will know immediately. Fiber optic sensors are installed within the cables. In real time, they monitor tension and expansion in the steel. This means the bridge is under constant observation. If strong winds or other factors cause any issues, engineers will detect them in advance and fix the problem. But the most impressive part is that during construction, scientists took all turbulence zones into account. How did they manage that? Well, there's a phenomenon called the Venturi effect. When wind passes through a narrow space, such as a canyon or tunnel, it accelerates. In Guizhou province, this effect is very common. Wind gusts in the Huajiang Canyon can reach speeds comparable to a high-speed train. So how did they manage to build a bridge under these conditions? Well, before construction began, engineers created a mock-up and tested it in a wind tunnel. Using special instruments, they studied wind directions and compiled a unique airflow map that allowed them to predict all turbulent zones. With this information, they moved on to the actual construction. Now, let's see another impressive bridge in China. This is the Sidu River Bridge, which spans the Sidu River, obviously. It was opened in 2009 and became part of an expanding highway system that connects the entire country. Of course, it's not as long or as tall as the Huajiang Bridge. It's supported by 2 8-shaped towers located on both sides of the roadway. Because of the suspension cables that dip down and rise again in the middle, the bridge looks, well, fragile. But don't judge by appearances. Engineers designed this structure to withstand a load of more than 43 million tons. That's equivalent to the weight of 430 massive aircraft carriers. So driving across it is completely safe. But do you know what the coolest part of this bridge is? To stretch the first pilot cable from one side to the other across a distance of more than 5,000 feet, builders used a rocket. You know those heist movies where the thieves release a grappling hook or a harpoon to cross from one building to another? The workers did something like that here. You probably had no idea that bridges could be built this way. Okay, let's now move from high-tech giant bridges to something much simpler and more dangerous. Think back to cartoons and movies about Mowgli and Tarzan. Remember how they swung through dense jungles, climbing vines and trees? Well, you can relive that experience if you travel to Ghana, where the Kakum Canopy Walk is located. So this is a series of rope bridges right inside a real jungle. 2 Canadian engineers and several locals created this attraction in 1995 to draw tourists. At first glance, these bridges look like the vine and wood rope bridges you've seen in adventure movies. However, they are reinforced with steel cables, aluminum, and wooden planks. And they also have protective mesh barriers to prevent accidental falls. Good thing. The bridges hang from trees at a height of more than 130 feet, and their total length is about 1,000 feet. So you can truly feel like Tarzan. Meanwhile, the bridge at El Caminito del Rey in Malaga, Spain, runs between 2 cliffs. Only 3 feet wide, it's suspended 328 feet above the river. It's a very narrow path. You'll probably feel dizzy during the crossing. But don't worry, the bridge is equipped with high railings. It was originally built so workers at hydroelectric power stations could cross the mountainous terrain. Eventually, it became a local landmark, a small but incredibly cozy and picturesque bridge. You look at it, and you immediately want to walk across this stunning path. Me? Not so much. I don't like heights. Well, we started this video with one of the most technologically advanced bridges in the world. Let's finish with one of the most dangerous and extreme. Oh goody. It's called the Husseini Suspension Bridge and is located in the Gilgit-Baltistan region in northern Pakistan. In this area, residents were cut off from the rest of the country because of the mountainous terrain and lack of roads. Wealthier locals could travel here by plane, but for everyone else, only pedestrian crossings were available. Then a highway was built here, along with several fragile wooden bridges, and the most famous of them is the Husseini Bridge. If you find yourself at the very beginning of it, you will probably think twice before crossing this path. Now it looks much better, but in the past, this bridge had many planks missing, and strong winds shook the structure from side to side. There were no safety nets or high railings. In 2011, the bridge was destroyed by monsoon rains. After that, it was completely reconstructed. Now it consists of steel cables and sturdy wooden planks. And nearby, there are ziplining and sky cycling stations. It's become a popular tourist attraction. So, if you enjoy testing your nerves and are a fan of Indiana Jones, you will definitely like this place. Me? I'll just watch you.
To build an underwater structure, you'll need some interesting engineering. A large bridge over a river or bay has its foundation rooted underwater. It's even more complicated with undersea tunnels. Underwater construction is challenging. Engineers need to deal with water pressure and corrosion from salt water. There's also a problem of finding suitable materials. The most typical of them are concrete, steel, and acrylic glass. Concrete doesn't care about water currents and doesn't get damaged by salt water. Steel provides underwater constructions with a strong structure. And acrylic glass is tough, long-lasting, and resistant to sunlight. It's also transparent. That's why it's often used to make windows in underwater buildings. Anyway, when the water is shallow, it's not that hard to build something there. Constructors create a temporary foundation. Then, on top of it, they build several piers supporting the upper structure. But if the waters are deep, engineers have to use other methods. Depending on which one they choose, water is either extracted or diverted during the construction process. One such method involves using a set of large driven piles. Those are long, thin columns made mostly of steel, but their interior is partially hollow. With the help of a huge hammer, they get driven into the waterbed, like nails are driven into a piece of wood. After that, these steel columns get filled with concrete through a special tube. The concrete displaces the water that was in the pile before. Concrete has the ability to set even when it's surrounded by water. That's why driven piles eventually turn into a stable foundation for overwater and underwater constructions. Driven piles are a very cost-effective way of building something that has to be fixed in place. They prevent things from being moved by the water current. Another way to build underwater structures is cofferdams. They are built temporarily and allow workers to create a dry space for the construction. The water gets pumped out of this enclosure, and the cofferdam works like a dam. A completed cofferdam looks like a massive pit with high walls surrounded by water. Cofferdams are made of rocks, steel, and even dirt. These constructions can be built fast and removed even faster. But the process of putting up a cofferdam is complicated and challenging for engineers. They have to make sure the structure won't flood or collapse. The simplest way to build a cofferdam is to pile up loads of dirt. But in this case, workers usually have to somehow make the construction stronger. It helps to protect it from the damage caused by water. Once the cofferdam is ready, pumps extract the water from its interior. Sometimes it's too expensive to build a very deep and strong cofferdam. In this case, constructors use several powerful pumps that get rid of excess water when it seeps through the cofferdam walls. If a cofferdam starts to fail, this process is slow and, luckily, predictable. On the construction site, there are not only main but also backup pumps. In case of emergency, they can kick into overdrive. Then, the water is kept out for the time the personnel needs to evacuate. Cofferdams are most often used during the construction of dams and bridges. But when a large ship, like a modern cruise liner, needs to be repaired, engineers use cofferdams too. Such vessels are too massive to be hauled ashore, and a cofferdam makes a perfect dry lock. The ship gets isolated from the water, and mechanics can repair it wherever it sits. Also, when a cruise ship needs to be expanded, engineers construct a cofferdam around it. Then they pump out all the water from the inside, creating a dry working place. The ship gets cut into two parts, and the process of its lengthening begins. There are several main types of cofferdams: braced, cellular, rock-filled, or earthen. For each of them, engineers need to figure out the best depth at which the wall should be put into the ground. It depends on the type of soil and the water reservoir itself. Braced cofferdams are mostly used during shallow water construction. Such a structure is actually a wall of sheet piles. Those are parts with interlocking edges. Usually, they're made of steel, but the material can also be reinforced concrete or timber. Sheet piles create something like a box around the needed area. Cellular cofferdams are also made of sheet piles, but in this case, the piles have a special shape. After being connected, they form cells that get filled with soil or clay. The cells, in turn, create a watertight wall. Thanks to its structure, it's exceptionally stable. Rock-filled cofferdams are used when there's a lot of rock at the construction site. They're built over the soil. This prevents the water from seeping into the cofferdam, and the rocks serve as reinforcement. Earthen cofferdams are built in areas where the water is less than 10 feet deep. They're created from the materials that are at hand: clay, sand, and even soil. There are also single-walled and double-walled cofferdams. The first type is used when the area of the construction isn't large and the depth is more than 20 feet. Such cofferdams are typically necessary for building bridges. Timber or wooden sheets are put into the sea or riverbed. After that, iron or steel sheets are added on the inside. On both sides of the wall, workers place half-filled bags of sand. Finally, the water gets pumped out and the cofferdam is ready for use. The double-walled cofferdam is used for large construction areas and when the water is very deep. Such construction sites need more powerful supports. This stronger cofferdam has two walls, which provides it with extra stability. Two piles get pushed into the waterbed with some space in between. The deeper it is, the bigger the space between the walls. Then they get attached to each other. After that, this space gets filled with soil. Cofferdams aren't cheap. This means that if one is used for a project, there are no other available options. For example, it's the best way to construct permanent dams. When the Hoover Dam was built, several cofferdams were put up to divert the water from the Colorado River. As soon as the project is finished, the water is pumped back into the cofferdam, and its walls, whatever they are, get removed. One more way of underwater construction is caissons. They're watertight structures that are put into the water. Even open, they remain dry inside. Workers can keep digging down until they reach some solid surface. That's where the caisson will be placed upon. What's so different about caissons is that they eventually become parts of the foundation for, let's say, a bridge or a dam. And even though you might not think of a bridge or a dam as an underwater construction, most of their crucial elements are underwater. For example, a large bridge wouldn't be able to hold its weight without massive supporting towers, and they stand in the water. There are several types of caissons: open, pneumatic, and box. Open caissons have no bottom. They're actually just vertical walls that allow builders to dig at the bottom of them. Pneumatic caissons keep the water from seeping through by using compressed air. This helps to maintain equal pressure inside and outside the construction. When workers dig out some materials, these get sent up through a special muck tube. When the caisson reaches the bedrock, workers fill it with concrete. Unlike others, a box caisson has a floor, and workers lower it onto a foundation that is constructed in advance. During the construction of the Brooklyn Bridge, engineers used two massive caissons. Thanks to them, they reached the bedrock and created the foundation for the towers of the bridge. And then there's also off-site construction. That's when things are not only built, but also assembled away from the site. In this case, engineers often use modular construction. That's when factory-produced building units are delivered to the site. There, they get assembled, like a giant Lego set. Structures are then usually floated to the site on huge barges, or they get towed there. After that, they're lowered in place. Some sink under their own weight. Others can only reach the seafloor after getting loaded with additional weights. This method of construction is rather expensive, and still, it's much more cost-effective than building right underwater. The latter needs skilled engineers and unique tools, and don't forget about the risks. But what about underwater tunnels? How on earth are they constructed? Modern tunnels are usually built with the help of massive tunnel boring machines. They even have a nickname: moles. Even though such a mechanism has an exorbitant price, several $1 million, it needs little time to create a long tunnel. The machine moves forward very slowly. It has a special circular plate with rotating disc cutters. They can easily chew through solid rock. The rock is then dropped onto an outboard conveyor belt. Another mechanism uses this rock to construct the tunnel's lining in the mole's wake. This way, the mole not only excavates the tunnel, but also reinforces the walls that will later support it. This method, and 11 huge tunnel boring machines, was used to build the 32-mile-long Channel Tunnel, and the whole process took only 3 years. Cut and cover is another method of creating a tunnel underwater. First, workers dig a trench in the ocean floor or riverbed. Then, they put concrete or steel tubes there, made in advance. After the tubes get covered with a thick layer of rock, the sections are connected. All workers have to do is pump out the water. That's how the Ted Williams Tunnel, connecting Logan Airport with South Boston, was built. There, they used 12 enormous steel tubes, more than 300 feet each, and the tubes contained already fully constructed roads.
Deep in the Himalayas, engineers are building a hydropower system that will generate more electricity than any other in the world. They keep most details about the construction secret, but we do know the project is worth $168 billion and has already become one of the most ambitious and controversial projects in China. At a place called the Great Bend, one of the most violent rivers on Earth makes a sudden U-turn around a mountain massif. Then it plunges downward with insane force. Nature already built the drop, and engineers just want to exploit it. Instead of stopping the river, they plan to use this massive altitude drop as leverage. They will catch the water before it escapes and force it through tens of miles of tunnels, bored straight into the rock. This project isn't one structure, it's a network of underground power stations buried so deep that satellites won't see most of it. Water will rush through rock tunnels at terrifying speed, slam into turbines hidden inside caverns, and then re-emerge downstream like nothing happened. The mountain becomes the machine. Engineers aren't just building infrastructure, they're rewiring geography. All this should generate up to 300 billion kilowatt hours every year. That's more than the world's largest existing hydropower system. Enough to reshape regional power grids, slash fossil fuel dependence, and shift global energy influence. This single project could outproduce entire countries. On paper, it looks like the clean energy jackpot, but in reality, it's a bet against physics, geology, and time. The Himalayas are not stable. They're still rising. Earthquakes happen constantly because two massive tectonic plates are grinding into each other. Tunnels don't just fracture here, they twist and squeeze and deform. Landslides can erase roads overnight. Rock pressure shifts unpredictably. When water flows through underground tunnels under extreme pressure, even a tiny fissure can turn into a catastrophic internal explosion. And unlike with surface dams, you can't see the failure forming. The project will need thousands of engineers because nothing about this is routine. Every tunnel must be mapped in 3 dimensions, accounting for stress, fault lines, and rock types that behave differently under pressure. Engineers model what happens if a tunnel collapses mid-flow. They figure out what happens if seismic waves hit during peak water load. They plan what to do if sediment clogs a turbine deep underground where humans can't reach it quickly. And then there's the ecosystem problem. This region remains one of the least studied on Earth. Seasonal water flows are crucial for plant life, fish migration, soil stability, and downstream agriculture across borders. Even small changes in timing or volume can ripple outward. Because so much of the system stays underground, real-time monitoring becomes harder than with visible dams. You won't get dramatic warning signs such as an overflowing reservoir or fissures in a concrete wall. Just invisible pressure building below your feet. Engineers know this, which is why they focus on redundancy, pressure release systems, and emergency bypass tunnels to make their project as safe as possible. But one mistake, and the consequences will be quite scary. This also isn't just about one country. Rivers don't respect state borders. What happens upstream affects millions downstream. Water captured at the Great Bend won't disappear, but its timing, temperature, and sediment load will change. That matters for ecosystems and communities far away that never agreed to the experiment. And yet, if it works, it changes everything. The success of this project would prove that future energy doesn't need sprawling surface destruction. Mountains themselves could become power plants, and gravity could be fuel. The Earth's own topography turns into infrastructure. That idea alone will influence megaprojects for decades. In South America, Central Asia, anywhere rivers fall hard enough to work for humans. If the system holds, it will stand as one of the greatest engineering achievements in history. If it fails, the river won't negotiate. It will reclaim every tunnel, chamber, and machine we carved into its path. The current world champion in size among hydroelectric dams is a Chinese megaproject too. The Three Gorges Dam, with a capacity of 22.5 gigawatts, sits across the Yangtze River that stretches thousands of miles from the Tibetan Plateau to the East China Sea. For centuries, the Yangtze was powerful, unpredictable, and dangerous, flooding cities, carving deep canyons, and shaping civilizations. By the late 20th century, China decided to take control of floods, water, and energy here. Construction began in the 1990s, but this was never going to be a quick job. We're talking about a structure that would hold back a reservoir stretching over 400 miles and covering ancient towns, farmland, and ecosystems. It took millions of cubic meters of material, tens of thousands of workers, and coordination that made the pyramids look like day labor. The engineering challenges were insane. The dam had to withstand not just the water behind it, but earthquakes, seasonal torrents, and the huge pressure of gravity pushing against it every second of every day. Engineers had to innovate on the go, reroute entire sections of the river, sink foundations deeper than most skyscrapers are tall, and design turbines that could convert the river's raw power into electricity without tearing themselves apart. When the dam was complete, the world finally saw what all the effort added up to. The Three Gorges Dam now produces more power than any other hydroelectric facility on Earth. It's gigawatts of electricity that lights up cities, fuel factories, and replace fossil fuels on a massive scale. During peak output, the dam can generate more electricity than dozens of nuclear plants working together. It's clean energy on a scale humanity has never seen before, and that alone would make the project historic. And the impact isn't only about energy. The dam changed water levels for hundreds of miles. The reservoir created behind it acts like a giant battery that stores enormous amounts of water that can be released in controlled ways. This transformed flood control on the Yangtze River. Entire cities that used to live in fear of seasonal floods now have a shield of water stored safely behind a wall of steel and concrete. For millions of people, that's literally life-saving infrastructure. Of course, nothing this huge comes without cost. The Three Gorges Dam forced the relocation of over 1 million people. Towns, villages, and entire cultural landscapes ended up underwater as the reservoir filled. Archaeologists raced to record ancient sites. Families had to start new lives elsewhere. In a way, this dam didn't just control a river, but rewrote human lives. The natural world paid a price too. River ecosystems shifted, fish migrations changed, and wetlands flooded. Species that depended on the old rhythm of the Yangtze found themselves in new and often harsher conditions. But probably the most surprising effect of the Three Gorges Dam is on the Earth itself. The weight of the reservoir's water is so enormous that it's actually slightly nudged our planet's crust. Geologists measuring shifts in the region's crust have detected movement that, although it's tiny, reflects forces at a scale most people never think about. A dam changed the ground beneath it. Today, the Three Gorges Dam continues to operate as the symbol of 21st century engineering. Ships pass through its locks, and electricity flows across regions that once relied on coal. Scientists study sediment buildup in the reservoir, climate impacts on the river, and how the dam interacts with Earth's crust. It's a laboratory as much as it is infrastructure, a place where humans test their understanding of nature on a massive scale. So there's no simple way to summarize the Three Gorges Dam because it isn't simple. This megaproject proved that humanity can bend a river and power a nation, and in many ways, it worked. But it also showed that when engineering reaches planetary scale, the risks grow just as fast as the rewards. The new Himalayan megadam isn't just a sequel, it's a test of whether we learned enough from the first time we tried to reshape the Earth itself. We all know about the Great Wall of China, but what about a massive Indian wall that was created from thorny shrubs and brushwood? This wall ran through the heart of India. It was smaller than the famous Chinese wall, but still extremely long and impressive. Why did we hear nothing about it, and why did it disappear? Let's figure it out. So, it all began in the 19th century. The British Empire decided to create a large barrier along a customs line right in the heart of India. This line stretched from the state of Punjab in the northwest to Madhya Pradesh. But what was the problem with this line? In India, salt was one of the most expensive products in the country, and the tax on it was very high. People didn't want to pay these taxes, so many smugglers transported salt from coastal areas to central regions. As a result, salt lost its value, and Britain incurred significant financial losses. That's why the idea of creating a living hedge to stop smuggling appeared. The point was not to waste time and effort building a stone wall, but instead to create a barrier made of trees, plants, and dense thorny shrubs. A barrier that could grow on its own. The idea of building a living hedge only seems simple. In reality, the builders faced enormous difficulties. At first, it was built mainly from dry branches that were brought in and piled into tall heaps, but such a wall quickly fell apart and the branches had to be replaced again and again. Then, a government official and botanist named Alan Octavian Hume was appointed Commissioner of Customs. He decided to use his knowledge of gardening and botany to strengthen the hedge. Which trees were better suited for dry soil and which for wetter areas? How could the most resilient species of shrubs be grown? how to destroy parasites, and how to thicken the wall so that no one could pass through it. Alan Octavian Hume had to solve these and many other questions. That is why he is credited with the greatest contribution to the creation of this project. People used various Indian trees and shrubs, including dwarf plum trees and bamboo, as well as many local plants. They did not simply pile everything together, but focused on planting and cultivation. Eventually, the length of the hedge exceeded 1,100 miles, which is roughly the distance between New York and Miami. The average height of the barrier was about 8 feet, but in some places it reached 12 feet in height and 14 feet in width. It was guarded by around 12,000 British soldiers stationed along its entire length. The cost of maintaining the wall amounted to approximately $220,716 in today's currency. Of course, this didn't stop the smugglers. Caravans of camels loaded with salt broke through the hedge. Officers often clashed with locals. The wall was destroyed not only by people but also by natural disasters. In some areas, trees don't grow because of the hot, dry climate. In other places, the wall was washed away by floods. In some regions, the soil was simply not fertile enough. They planted again and again, dug trenches, brought ground from other areas, and worked tirelessly until they found the ideal solution for each climatic zone. To create just 1 mile of the wall, builders used about 250 tons of thorny brushwood and other organic material. Each year, people transported around 100,000 tons of plant matter to reinforce weak sections of the hedge. They used almost every type of local thorny shrub. In some areas where the soil was especially dry, the trees couldn't grow. Builders brought in tons of other soil, dug up the top layer, and replanted everything. In addition to this, people faced many problems that interfered with construction. For example, white ants attacked the hedge and destroyed large sections of the wall. Forest fires burned trees for many miles and deprived builders of construction material. Storms, hurricanes, and whirlwinds tore down parts of the wall. Builders had to construct large embankments to protect the wall from floods. One of the most unpleasant challenges was locust invasions. Just imagine millions of flying, buzzing insects swarming the wall and eating all the vegetation. Parasitic vines grew around the trees and simply destroyed them. In one area, rats appeared, and builders brought in a group of wild cats to fight the rodents. All the work to build the hedge took about 30 years. When the wall was completed, it was divided into about 100 sections, each guarded by patrol services. Of course, gaps still remained in the wall. Smugglers broke through it, throwing sacks of salt over the top or climbing the trees within the wall. Officers constantly clashed with them. After such massive and exhausting work, the wall was expected to last a very long time, but in 1879 it was no longer needed. The salt tax began to be collected directly at production sites, making smuggling pointless. Once the wall stopped being maintained, it began to deteriorate and overgrow. In some places, it was dismantled and used for firewood. In other areas, natural disasters finished it off. In modern times, it's almost impossible to find the remains of the hedge. Some sections of it were turned into roads. All the information we know about this fence is stored in the books and records of various researchers who communicated with local people or were directly involved in the process. Now, let's learn something about another, much more famous wall located in China. This wall still remains the largest and most extensive structure ever built by humans. Its length is about 13,000 miles, roughly the distance from Alaska to South America. But it's not just a wall along a straight flat road. It goes up and down, twists and straightens across mountains and plateaus. It's no surprise that this massive construction was built over a span of 2,000 years. The Great Wall of China is divided into many sections and consists of towers, watch points, garrison stations, and barracks. All of this was built from bricks and cut stone blocks. To bind them together, builders used lime mortar. But not every part of the wall consists of structures with towers like the ones you see in photos and on the internet. In some areas, it's simply massive ridges of compacted ground. It's hard to imagine how titanic this labor was. All of these construction materials had to be transported into the mountains. People didn't just stack bricks on top of each other. They leveled the ground, reinforced the foundation, and built day after day, year after year, generation after generation. Today, many parts of the Great Wall of China are destroyed. Some elements were ruined by natural disasters, others by erosion, and many sections were destroyed by people. Some of the damage is connected to interesting legends. One of them tells the story of Lady Ming Jiang. Her husband was sent to build the Great Wall of China. For a long time, she received no news from him, so one day she decided to visit him and bring him winter clothes. When she arrived at the wall, she learned that her husband was no longer alive. Lady Ming Jiang wept bitterly in her grief. According to the legend, her sorrowful crying caused part of the wall to collapse. Millions of people built the wall over the course of 2,000 years, and this raises a question. Why? What was the point of all this construction? One of the main reasons was to protect the country from enemies. Essentially, the entire Great Wall of China is a long defensive line. The wall also helped unite and preserve the unity of fragmented states that eventually formed a single China. But what purpose does it serve today? It's a UNESCO World Heritage Site. It represents a symbol of culture, unity, and the history of the country. And from an economic point of view, it attracts